ID in the D in the town all day. ID in the D in the SEA. ID in the D in the town all day. ID in the D in the SEA.
Hello and welcome to episode 403 of the fabulous Peltoncast, sponsored by our friends at Pagliacci Pizza. I'm your co-host, Kevin Pelton.
And I'm Tristan Carcino.
And we're coming to you from separate locations this week. I'm in Seattle, Washington, home of the four-time WNBA champion Storm.
And I'm coming to you from Renton, Washington, home of Super Bowl 48 champion Seattle Seahawks. It's the Alex Rodriguez edition of the Peltoncast, or it's probably Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Sitting right there in front of us.
That. It definitely better be the Russell Wilson edition of the podcast. Well, plenty of Seahawks news, and it feels like with the Super Bowl in the rearview mirror, the offseason is coming into view for the Seahawks. Obviously, they've already been busy preparing for the next season by hiring a head coach. They now have several coordinators and made a key decision on Thursday about Geno Smith. And here to help us at long last preview the Seahawks 2024 NFL offseason after joining us for not one but two emergency pods, please welcome back to the pod, Ben Baldwin.
Thanks for having me. I always love doing this episode, and I confess I'm a little bit nervous this time because I'm afraid that my over-under picks did not do well. So I'm interested to see how that goes.
Nervous.
That's a preview.
If you're not aware, we're used to failure here on the podcast in the city of Seattle, so don't be nervous.
Yeah. I remember my Atlanta Falcons 2023 overlock, and that's not going to start us off well once we get there.
Let me just tell you, whether it's right or not, you argue that the process was right.
Yes.
That's all that matters.
Kevin they didn't have a starting quarterback,
outcomes.
But it was a good process.
Well, maybe they will have a new starting quarterback next year. And I think that's where we should start.
Yeah. Well, if it's going to be Geno Smith, it's going to be via trade. Friday was the deadline for the Seahawks, I guess not a deadline, but Friday was the date where Geno Smith's contract for 2024, his base salary was going to guarantee for injury previously that 12.7 million, or guarantee entirely. Previously, that 12.7 was guaranteed only for injury. And my ESPN colleague Adam Schefter reported Thursday morning that the Seahawks will be keeping Geno Smith, have informed him they'll be keeping him past that date. Also the reporting was very clear that they didn't say that Geno Smith was going to be on the Seahawks in 2024, that he was going to be on the roster through tomorrow and not being waived. And I guess that's the starting point is, what are the chances the Seahawks trade Geno Smith?
I did think the wording of Schefter's tweets was very interesting because I think the first one said like he'll be on the roster this week, and then another one said even if the Seahawks it's a very attractive price for either the Seahawks or a team that is interested in trading for the Seahawks. And
right.
You always have to wonder where this language is coming from. And I think the most obvious explanation is that the Seahawks are open to hearing what other people might want to offer for him, whether or not they actually want to keep him. Like there's no harm in hearing offers at this stage, even if they're planning on moving forward with him, at least in 2023. I personally would be pretty surprised if he was not the quarterback this coming season, because I think part of the attractiveness of the Seahawks job is that like they're pretty close to the playoffs, they're a stable organization, like especially comparing them to the Commanders or some of these other teams that were making coaching hires. And I guess it's not impossible, but taking all that and then turning around and trading the starting quarterback right after completely overturning your staff, I think would be a bit of a surprise to me.
Yeah. So what is the next deadline? There's another deadline, basically like a month until March, right? Where the Seahawks have this window. Can you explain what that means to me?
Yeah, so March 18th is when he's due a $9.6 million roster bonus. And that, like his signing bonus, would accelerate to the cap entirely if you were to trade him. So if you're thinking about trading Geno Smith, it's probably got to be that by that point. And unless you convert that to salary or change it some other way, push back that deadline. Once you get to that point, suddenly the cap hit is significant enough that it probably does not make sense to trade Geno Smith. And you'll recall that back in the bold predictions, way back in 2023, when Pete Carroll was the coach of the Seahawks.
Wow.
And Kalen DeBoer was the head coach of the Huskies, and everyone loved him.
Ryan Grubb was the offensive coordinator of the Huskies.
Ryan Grubb was an offensive coordinator in Seattle. Some things haven't changed. I boldly predicted that the Seahawks would trade Geno Smith at that point. under the logic, kind of similar to what's been discussed here, the salary for Geno Smith as a starting quarterback, given what he's accomplished, the way he played in the second half of last season, it's a really good value at this point. I think, especially if you're taking that on as another team that doesn't have to deal with, the reason that the amount that Geno Smith is actually going to get paid to play football in 2024 isn't that much for a starting quarterback is because he got paid a lot of money in 2023. And that was primarily in the form of a signing bonus. And that's just gradually going on the Seahawks cap. If you're another team, you just get him at that new 2024 money. It's an incredible value for you. So that's why he could potentially have trade value. Now, that was also in the context of me thinking that the combination of John Schneider and Pete Carroll might think that they could get good enough play out of Drew Lock, that this was a place to save money potentially with all the other money that's coming due on the roster, as we'll talk about in a bit. I think the fact, I don't know that McDonald being a new coach necessarily affects it because, one thing that's become increasingly clear is John Schneider has significantly more power, which is a normal amount of NFL power. He got a title boost that was revealed last week at some point to, I believe, executive vice president in addition to GM. Like, it's possible if John Schneider believes that rebuilding is the correct course and Mike McDonald's willing to go along with it because he got the 6-year contract that could last, see him through an entire rebuild. Maybe that's the direction. But I don't think there's the same Pete Carroll-led impetus to maintain continuity on the defensive side with the expensive players there that I think could have been a factor in a Geno Smith trade.
Absolutely. And also some of the, we didn't see this necessarily play out, but a little bit of the Pete Carroll bravado about quarterbacks, which that was deep down as something that was kind of core to Pete Carroll, seemingly thinking that he can win without a superstar quarterback, that his system would help you win games. But to me, I was thinking about this. I saw the post. It felt to me like it was language that was coming. The Seahawks made the decision or whatever. They probably made the decision before today, whatever, but they informed Geno Smith and then they turned around and talked to Adam Schefter. Like, those two things happen pretty simultaneously. We also saw Geno's reaction to it like 10 minutes before the Adam Schefter tweet. So it's not like this was, I think they probably had some indications, but these two things happened very quickly. Geno being paid that money is good for Geno. The Seahawks obviously are open to a trade offer because almost every team is open to a trade offer for almost any player. And of course, they're willing to frame this as they're not going to hurt Geno's feelings at this point. He's not the type of quarterback that you say he's absolutely off the table. No question we would trade him, right? Like, I don't think they need to frame it in the media like that. Geno Smith has been through it. Geno Smith has had this whole long career to get to this point. He's going to be excited about being the starting quarterback in Seattle or probably somewhere else. The problem is you need somebody else to trade with. And you have to be able to find that value. And I think the Seahawks, at a price, are willing to trade Geno Smith because almost every team is willing to trade almost any player at a price, right? There's almost no player in the NFL who is completely untradeable. So I did a little exercise of going through the any chance in hell teams trade partners for the Seahawks.
You got out your Joe Cronin notebook and wrote down all the potential trade offers like he did with Damian Lillard.
Is that what he did? Joe Cronin wrote him out?
He brought it out at the press conference.
I'm glad you're doing this because I was just stopping to think like which teams would actually be interested in Geno Smith. And then I realized we did almost this exact same process last year when he would be potentially a free agent and trying to figure out which teams might be interested in him in the free agent market. So I'm
honestly,
interested to see this list.
Some of those teams are the same. But so the teams that I came down to, these are any chance in hell teams, as far as I can tell, who don't have a young star quarterback, an entrenched quarterback, or a bunch of money tied up in somebody. So the teams are the Patriots, the Commanders, the Steelers, the Bears, the Vikings, the Falcons, the Broncos, or maybe the Titans is basically what I got to of somebody who Geno would immediately be the starter for that team. They would value having him on the roster in 2024. And when you go through those, and I pulled up the Ringer mock draft that came out, I believe, yesterday, just to see who they had projected as starting quarterbacks. Because you look at the pool of players that are going to be quarterbacks that are going to be entering the league and probably are going to want starting jobs quickly. And that starts dropping off teams pretty quickly. The Patriots have the 3rd pick in the draft. The Ringer has them taking Drake May with that 3rd pick. Could you do both? Maybe, but that would be a lot of money to invest into quarterbacks when you're trying to overhaul a complete roster.
Who are the Commanders taking if the Patriots are taking Drake May?
The Commanders have the second pick in the draft, and in that mock, they're taking Jaden Daniels.
Okay,
So
interesting.
it's quarterbacks 1, 2, 3, and that's
Yep.
3 of the teams that are on this list.
Yep.
And then if the Bears take a quarterback, that's another team that's off the list, presumably because they trade for Justin Fields.
Exactly. So the Commanders have picked 2, Jaden Daniels in the mock. The chances of at least 2 of these 3 teams taking a quarterback are extraordinarily high.
Oh yeah,
right?
for sure.
Then you have the Steelers, pick 20 in the draft, also have Kenny Pickett. Also, I believe in various odds-making websites are more likely to have Justin Fields on their roster than the Seahawks are, or than the Bears are.
Yep.
So seems like a very likely Justin Fields destination should the Bears draft Caleb Williams with the first pick in the draft. And to me, that this is one of the ones that's in the maybe range. The Falcons have the 8th pick in the draft. In that mock, they had them taking the last quarterback who's taken in the first round, J.J. McCarthy, with the 8th pick. I think they are also, there's one other quarterback who's out there, or a couple of other quarterbacks who are out there. You have the Broncos, they have the 12th pick. The Broncos are not dancing with the Seahawks again. There's just, I think you can just cross it off as far as quarterbacks go. The Titans have Will Levis. I think Will Levis is probably the quarterback of the future for the Titans. This is a territory where there's a maybe to me. So you come down to, basically, it's between the Vikings, the Falcons, maybe the Steelers. I would be pretty surprised. And then out there on the market, you have the current quarterback of the Broncos, Russell Wilson, and the current quarterback of the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, who those 2 quarterbacks are going to end up somewhere, right?
What about the Raiders? Was that on your list?
The Raiders are the only other option that I went through. And Aiden O'Connell, I think they could also be a Kirk Cousins destination, one of these players. So maybe you have 3 places that could be interested in a Geno Smith trade, but then you also have all these quarterbacks. Michael Penix Jr. wasn't one of those players who's taken in the first round. There are other, Bo Nix wasn't one of those players who's taken in the first round. There are other quarterbacks out there, and you have 3, probably 4 quarterbacks who are almost certainly going to be taken with the first pick, plus 2 other quarterbacks that are out there. This is assuming Baker Mayfield goes back to Tampa Bay, which I'm expecting to happen. And I just don't know if there is a trade partner who's out there that is going to value Geno Smith at this contract in the same way that the Seahawks are going to value Geno Smith, or be willing to give the Seahawks enough capital to make it worthwhile for them to start over. And I think if they do, they probably need to end up out of this draft with maybe one of those other quarterbacks, or at the very least a quarterback in the J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix territory. So
yeah, I think that sounds reasonable, and it is pretty similar to the conversation we had last year, where like maybe if other teams really love Geno Smith, then he might have like waited until free agency started and gotten a stronger offer, but maybe the interest just wasn't there, like perhaps some people expected based on his numbers from that season.
I think there is possibly a stronger case for Geno Smith now because he's done it for 2 years. It's harder to write off as a 1-year fluke. Did you mention the Giants in that list?
The number to get off Daniel Jones is an obscene number. It's like $60 million.
Okay, but just because you have Daniel Jones on the roster doesn't mean you have to let him play football.
It would be such, like, I went and looked up the number for them to get off Daniel Jones, and it would be such a high number that I would be shocked if they would. I think they basically, the amount they're paying Daniel Jones, they need to start him for 1 more year.
I've got a high number. It's their number of losses last season. They're ranking offensive DVOA. My big takeaway from that conversation, though, is I am hyped for Russell Wilson's comeback with the Vikings next year.
I think it's a Falcon. I think Russell Wilson's a Falcon. I think Kirk is going to stay in Minnesota. I think Kirk's going to stay in Minnesota. I think Russ ends up a Falcon. The NFC South is just where these quarterbacks go.
I do think there's a scenario where like the price for Kirk Cousins is so high that, Geno Smith starts to look attractive relative to that to some team. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a musical chairs. And the wild card here, as soon as the Seahawks, as we've alluded to but not specifically said, hired Ryan Grubb as their offensive coordinator, people immediately began to connect the dots to the possibility of them drafting Michael Penix Jr. I think that's another one where the offensive coordinator doesn't run the draft. Like, does Penix become more attractive given his experience in Grubb's scheme? I think so, but I don't know if it's night and day as a difference.
But there's also the Seahawks hired J.J. McCarthy's defensive coordinator from a couple of years ago as well. So there are 2 quarterbacks that are out there that you can see ties. I don't know if they're going to be in JJ McCarthy territory. I wouldn't be shocked if they kept Geno Smith and also drafted Michael Penix Jr. I think that is probably a more likely outcome than Michael Penix Jr. You don't need to turn over. He's a little bit older, but you don't need to turn over the roster to him right away in the same way that you do with those 3 quarterbacks that are at the top.
Do we know his expected range of getting drafted, referring to Penix? And I'm asking because at least the last time I checked, it seemed like a lot of people thought he was like a second rounder. But of course, the Seahawks don't have a second round pick, and it's not that they couldn't get one, but my sense so far is that a lot of the quarterbacks that they like, if they're not going to spend a first round pick on a quarterback, then a lot of the quarterbacks that they might be interested in will be gone by the time they actually pick again.
I get now the other possibility is them trading down if they feel like Penix could still be available later. I think that's something that would make a lot of sense. But I think he's a bit all over the map, I would say, as a prospect, and definitely an eye of the beholder kind of prospect.
25 to 90 or something, I feel like Penix could be.
Yeah, that's a big range, but consistent with the ranges we've seen of other quarterbacks in that kind of range where we really have no idea how far some of these guys are going to fall.
Once you fall out of the very top. I think the Seahawks are much more likely to prioritize defense. And I think it would make sense for them to prioritize defense because of how bad the defense was last year. Right now, the offense is not the problem. They have to build long term. But the reality is they have a lot of free agent defenders, which we'll talk about in a second. They have a lot of players who are going to probably be gone from the roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that they need to replace. And they have the draft picks to be able to do that. So I think as far as pressing needs go, they have to be thinking long term as well. I feel like quarterback, should it be Geno Smith coming back, is just not the kind of pressing need. If he is this quarterback, he could be playing through the rest of this contract at a relatively similar level. And Geno Smith has proven to be, especially if there's a good defense, a playoff caliber quarterback.
Yep. Do you feel like there's, I mean, John Schneider always talks about drafting quarterbacks and just never drafts a single one of them since Russell Wilson. Was Alex Magoo drafted?
He was a 7th rounder, I think.
Yeah, he was the one. I do think there's an interesting element of, the Packers' philosophy with Jordan Love has been validated a little bit after this season of maybe the time to go looking for a quarterback is when you aren't desperate for a quarterback, and you can wait for someone to fall into your lap. And I do think that's a potential scenario. I don't think the Seahawks should be thinking solely in terms of needs. Like, if the value is there and they believe in a quarterback, even if they also believe in Geno Smith, like Geno Smith is not going to be the quarterback of the Seahawks forever. We know that. So, there is room for another quarterback to come in, especially because you're not talking about investing a top 5 pick in that player. You're talking about at most investing the 16th pick right now, unless they trade up. All right. Should we talk about the coaches?
Yeah.
So we obviously have talked a lot about the Ryan Grubb possibility on last week's podcast. It did not come as a surprise to us. Although I would have said, I think when we recorded last week, that I thought it was, less than 50-50 that Grubb ended up as the offensive coordinator. Then you subsequently have him out in public referring to himself as Alabama's OC while speaking to people. Chip Kelly ends up going to Ohio State as offensive coordinator, much to our delight, taking him out of the mix for the Seahawks job.
Our delight? You argued for Chip Kelly. You go to Hawaii one time, and then all of a sudden you come back and you're like, who here could have supported Chip Kelly as offensive coordinator?
I argued for not certainty about offensive coordinator. That didn't mean I wanted Chip Kelly as offensive
You loved Chip Kelly a week ago. Oh, my God.
And lo and behold, is broken at I've forgotten what's the name of the pub, the Seahawks
Dino's pub.
Yeah, Dino's. Okay, I thought so. It's broken by patrons of that. Ryan Grubb is the Seahawks' new offensive coordinator. Tristan, how hyped are you?
Oh, I'm so hyped. I can't believe we weren't able to. You were literally like en route to Hawaii when this happened.
I was
or
on a
something.
plane, yes.
I'm so upset that we weren't able to record an emergency pod. But the thing was, you'd kind of talked me out of Ryan Grubb the day before, and then I talked myself right back in. Because the people who believe in Ryan Grubb as offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks is Mike Macdonald, is John Schneider. And I trust their perspective about who should be offensive coordinator of the Seahawks more than I trust yours, ESPN's Kevin Pelton.
Yeah, the point was not that I think Ryan Grubb should not be the Seahawks offensive coordinator. Was I excited when I heard this news? I absolutely was. The point is, we just shouldn't have much certainty about how good any offensive coordinator is going to be, especially one who has not coached at all in the NFL. Ben, where are you at on this?
Wait, no, I
on
want to
this?
get at one point. I want to get at one
Okay.
point here before
Okay.
then. The thing that we know is that we saw the chart. It was basically neutral scenarios. How often do teams pass around college football, right? And the Huskies were an extreme outlier as far as passing the ball. And that's what we need to know more about is the philosophy and how you approach offense more than anything else. Because again, basically all of the most successful offenses around the NFL were teams that pass the ball more often. And the Huskies ended up running the ball very well after that, but it was because of their ability to pass the ball, opening up that run game for them. So I think scheme wise, and then also we talked about offensive line, which was people were like, well, it's not so easy to pass the ball as well when you don't have such an amazing offensive line, which nobody before Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer took over the Washington Huskies was like, oh, this is an elite offensive line unit. And they're bringing that coach with them to the NFL in Scott Huff, which we'll get to in a second. It's just like, it's one of those things that every offensive line looks great when the scheme is right. And I don't think it's something that you would just say carte blanche. The Huskies had this amazing offensive line. They had all of it all together. They had the scheme, they had the quarterback, they had the receivers, all of these different things. But I think you have to come back to the biggest difference between the 2 years. Michael Penix was a big one, but also the coaching staff was a huge difference between the Jimmy Lake season and the Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb era. And the offense looked night and day in those two time periods. So I'm personally excited about it. Ben, sorry.
I should be the last person to weigh in here because my level of paying attention to college football in recent years just is not what it used to be. So if you guys are excited, then I'm happy to be excited too. I think I do agree with Kevin's point that it's hard to know how an offensive coordinator in college will translate into the NFL. And that's why drilling really down into the minutia of coaching hiring, I was encouraged by I don't even know his name yet, but the passing game coordinator that hired from the Rams. So they will have somebody on their offensive staff who has not only coached in the NFL but coached from the Rams. And I know the Shane Waldron era is kind of controversial, but I thought he did a good job. I was pretty high on him, and like if the Seahawks can get that level of coordinating again, then I would be pretty happy. So I'm glad they're going back to the well of stealing from Sean McVay's coaching tree.
I was sitting next to a Bears fan watching the Super Bowl outside at a bar on Sunday, and told him that he should be excited about Shane Waldron being the Bears offensive coordinator. So I agree with you on that. I mean, a few things. Number one, it's amusing that like in selling Ryan Grubb to Seahawks fans, all the local media, and then even to a degree, Mike McDonald had to be like, he doesn't pass the ball all the time, guys. They were just really good at passing. It's like, no, we want the
Yeah,
pass.
do that, dude. Pass the ball all the time. But what was the motion percent? I don't know if I looked at that. Husky,
Off the charts. Yeah, no, I mean that's
what else could you want? That's it. Really, what it comes down to between like the scheme matters, but the shit that matters is how often do you pass? How often do you use motion? There are all these things that give you an advantage in an NFL and in a football game in general. And you have the option to either use them or not. And some people, surprisingly, decide not to use the things that you get an advantage to win the game for. And Ryan Grubb uses those things. That's what we should know about him.
Well, the other thing I would like to see is experience coaching against NFL caliber defenses. And, we had a conversation about this on Discord where Zach Jabal, who's a bit of a skeptic of the hire, pointed out, I was making the case that I'm not sure how big the gap is between offenses at the college level and the NFL now, because so much of the spread concepts have come into the NFL game. And, the biggest difference from a schematic standpoint often seems to be how much the quarterback is under center. Which in the NFL, in college can occasionally be never. It was not the case for Ryan Grubb, but the vast majority of the time Michael Penix Jr. was in shotgun, basically only in short yardage. Did he run a lot under center, which does tend to be more conducive to successful play action. But the point that Zach made is college is a lot of one reads stuff, 1-2 reads, and kind of automatic keys that don't work as well against more exotic, more sophisticated, more capable of disguising NFL defenses. The other thing I would point out is one of the places that the Huskies in particular had a lot of success the last few years is, you will instantly see this in your mind's eye when I say it. Get to the line, kind of play fake or something, try to get the defense to commit, see what they're running, and then you look to the sideline and Grubb and Kalen DeBoer call in what the play is actually going to be based on what they're saying. There's not time for that in the NFL. That's not an NFL concept whatsoever. So there is going to be an adjustment. What I would say, I agree with your points about the use of motion and the willingness to pass the ball. To me, the most important thing that kind of sits over all of those is just a willingness to learn and embrace the trends and, not be flexible and not be rigid in what you're doing. And that is something that Mike McDonald did highlight in talking about Ryan Grubb, and I think is maybe more important than any of the specific schematic things.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to be different. There's going to be time. But if conceptually that's how you approach football, you're probably going to be successful. And he's been successful everywhere he's been. I also think it's telling about Ryan Grubb that Kalen DeBoer is considered the offensive coach. He handed off play calling duty to Ryan Grubb. This wasn't like Jed Fish, where Jed Fish is like, I call plays. That is what I do here, right? As the head coach. Ryan Grubb was calling those plays at UW. He has the experience doing that. He's not just a coordinator who's sitting under a successful offensive head coach in that way.
Which also is something that separates him from, Tanner Angstrand of the Lions, was someone who was considered a strong candidate, has not called plays at all. So
did you see the play? I can't even remember seeing this live. Maybe it was the USC game where it was a flea flicker into a screen pass.
Flicker into was that? I feel like that was actually in one of the playoff games, wasn't it?
Maybe it was. I was just like, they're definitely they were willing to dial up some shit.
Oh yeah,
in this offense, and the pieces that he has coming in it's an extraordinarily experienced quarterback, right? There was always the comparisons between Penix and Geno Smith for a long time. A very deep receiving core, growing offensive line, right? There are a lot of pieces that Ryan Grubb is going to have available to him here. And I think that's part of the reason, aside from, being able to stay in Seattle, or it seemed like he wanted to stay, the infrastructure, this coaching staff, they've brought a lot of pieces to Seattle and have sold the Seahawks as a roster and an organization in general. And you see them kind of going out and plucking these folks that could have easily, Ben's gone, could have easily stayed where they were beforehand, right? The Rams passing game coordinator. He has Puka Nacua down there, but it's this gives him an opportunity to coach under somebody else, right? To not just 100% be in Sean McVay's shadow. And the fact that he was willing to come to Seattle, I think, is a huge deal as part of this.
You mentioned Scott Huff, the offensive line coach for UW, who is also coming to the Seahawks with Ryan Grubb. I think fascinating to me because Scott Huff coached at UW under Chris Peterson, Jimmy Lake, and Kalen DeBoer. I think he was the only coach to be retained across all three of those coaching staffs, and getting a lot of different perspectives, but being respected by all of those groups. Was headed to Alabama with Kalen DeBoer and with Ryan Grubb before Grubb decided to come to the Seahawks. So that I do think is a nice hire for the Seahawks as well. All right, let's talk about this Rams coach. The Seahawks have hired someone who has met Sean McVay.
The linchpin of the offseason. This is how deep we get. We're finally, now that Mike McDonald, that's great. Jay Harbaugh, that's great. Here we go now. Now we're getting down to the real coaches.
Well, I don't sadly have a lot of notes on the assistant special teams coordinator that they also announced on Thursday. But Mike Garafolo of NFL Network, the first to report that the Seahawks are hiring Rams pass game specialist Jake Peetz as their pass game coordinator. Peetz has spent time in both the NFL and college coaching ranks, including a year as the Panthers QB coach before spending 2021 as LSU's offensive coordinator under Ed Orgeron before Orgeron was fired. Not a great offensive season there. The Tigers ranked 64th in offensive FPI that season, although I guess that's better than some of the Chip Kelly seasons that you were lamenting possibly on
He's also not the offensive coordinator.
For the Seahawks?
There's definitely, yes, there's a difference between those two things.
True. Then returned to the NFL afterwards with the Rams. He reunited with Sean McVay, who had previously worked with for one season in Washington when he was an offensive quality control coach. So it'd be interesting. It does seem like a little bit of a lateral move to go from pass game specialist to pass game coordinator. I guess you do get coordinator in your title, but it is notable to make that move and to do it within division.
One of the reasons I'm talking myself into being excited about this is that McVay worked with him a long time ago and then went out and rehired him at the Rams. So hopefully that means McVay has a high opinion of him, and yes, and also that he is willing to move from the Rams to the Seahawks. So heck yeah, hire from the Rams offensive coaching staff, and that's hopefully will little by little deplete them while helping out the Seahawks a little bit.
All right, well, let's turn to the defensive side of the ball. This has obviously gotten less attention because that's Mike Macdonald's specialty. He said he's going to continue calling plays, but the Seahawks do have now a defensive coordinator as well, that being former Cowboys defensive line coach Aiden Durde, a native of Middlesex, England. Durde played in NFL Europe, began his coaching career in London before coming stateside in 2014 as the first British NFL coach. After spending some time in Dallas, he hooked up with Dan Quinn at Atlanta, then followed him back to the Cowboys as the defensive line coach. His last 3 seasons, this will be his first opportunity as a coordinator. So I'm not sure what this tells us, what we know necessarily about someone who's been a position coach over a period of time, but certainly exciting for the Seahawks fans in Great Britain.
Yeah, and like we talked about a lot over the Pete Carroll years, it's hard to know how important a defensive coordinator is if your head coach is a defensive-minded coach. And we complained for a very long time about Pete Carroll defenses switching coordinators a lot and always having the same problems. So I think over the years we've kind of minimized the importance of this role. So given all that, it's going to be hard to know exactly what his fingerprints are on this, especially since Mike Macdonald's never been a head coach before.
Tristan, you got anything here?
Seems great to me. I don't know. I feel like, the same as Ben. Don't have strong feelings about this particular hire, but I feel like the process made sense in this particular decision.
The most important question, has he given a press conference or anything? How strong does he have, like a strong British accent that's going to be fun to listen to?
Oh yeah. People immediately pointed out because he was on Hard Knocks. I believe that must have been when he was an intern for the Cowboys back in like the 2014.
He also gave a press conference today.
Yeah, he did do a media tour today. Ryan Grubb also did some interviews. So yeah, it's out there.
Okay, good.
All right, well, now let's turn our attention back to the roster. The Seahawks do have one other key player with a big contract guarantee on Friday. That's Draymond Jones, last year's major free agency addition. $7 million of his $11 million base salary becomes guaranteed on Friday. We haven't heard any reporting there, but I think it would be pretty surprising if the Seahawks chose to move on from Jones after 1 year where he wasn't the problem with the defensive line. I think it's safe to say. So
definitely not the problem, but I think the Seahawks probably did not get as much out of him as they were hoping when they made that splash signing. Although that's probably not a reason to move on from him after 1 year, especially turning over the whole defensive coaching staff.
Right. And he ended up playing a lot of defensive end in base situations instead of playing, inside, as I think the Seahawks projected initially after they made the trade for Leonard Williams and had the Uchenna Nwosu injury at edge that kind of depleted their depth there. So a slightly different role than, what you would likely expect from him this year. The Seahawks start the off season in effective $10 million over the cap for overthecap.com when you account for, I'm not sure if that's factoring in kind of like the injury, but I think that includes the bonus pool for the NFL draft. They're $5 million over period. So some changes are coming, and there are certainly some places that they can save a lot of money. Do we want to start by talking about it, kind of a general overview of the roster, or do we want to start by doing the percentage chances of returning for players?
Let's do it as the general overview first.
All right. Offensively, I feel like the Seahawks are largely in pretty good shape here. They've got, we've talked about the quarterback position at length. That's going to be the biggest question mark. They've drafted running backs in the second round the last couple of years, so I certainly hope they're not planning to invest many more resources in that position. Wide receiver, they look pretty well set. see on Tyler Lockett if he's a part of this, and or if you're potentially looking for a third receiver at some point. Offensive line, they've got some free agents at guard, but again, the major investment is there. It's defense where, look, this team has fallen short time and time again, and we'll see how much replacing Pete Carroll with Mike McDonald is a part of solving that. But presumably, he's also going to come in with some different ideas of who he wants on the roster.
I think the one disappointing development, and not that it was anybody's fault last season, was that coming into the season, we thought we have two tackles that are very good on rookie contracts, and these are going to be the bookends for the last decade. And unfortunately, it seems like Abe Lucas's knee just might not let him be that person. And I think that is on the offensive side of the ball. I agree that they're much more set on that side of the ball, but depending on Abe Lucas's health, then that tackle position might become an issue again, unfortunately. But on us on the outside, we don't really have any idea of what it's going to look like this coming season.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Tyler,
He had knee surgery a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I guess my hope would be that, he was trying to cut through whatever it was over the course of the season, and that surgery will clean it up. But certainly never good news when you have to have knee surgery at that stage of your career. And then I guess, should we talk about Charles Cross? Because I don't think he took the step forward that maybe you were hoping his second season. Development is not linear. I wouldn't say I'm down on him necessarily, but you were hoping that left tackle would maybe be more of a strength last season.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of examples of left tackles that took huge step forward in their second season, and Cross definitely was not that. But I think like in the stuff I've seen, like for example, PFF's Timo Riske has these metrics that look at tackle grades adjusted for double teams and the defender that you're trying to block and everything. And I think he was like slightly above average, which like for a second year tackle on a rookie contract, I think that's perfectly fine. And they won't have to make a decision about their long-term left tackle position and what they're going to do with them for a while. So at least in my mind, I'm thinking of that as set for another few years, and hopefully he will make this jump at some point.
Tyler Lockett's contract. So Tyler Lockett being the most obvious player, DK Metcalf's entrenched, Jackson Smith and Jigba is just drafted. Tyler being the most obvious one, getting a little bit older to move on from. What could they save by even moving on from Tyler Lockett at this point?
I think they restructured him last year, and it's considerably less than it would have been then, but it's still he's got a $27 million cap hit going into this season, and it's about 20 million in dead money, so it'd be about a $7.1 million difference.
So it really wouldn't make sense. And Tyler Lockett, if you're talking at a $7 million difference, productivity maybe down a little bit last year, but not enough to be willing to move on from him. So I think we'd have to assume that Tyler Lockett's coming back, or the value that they'd get in a trade would have to be so exceedingly high to warrant that I just don't see it happening with a receiver like Tyler Lockett. So this is probably the offense.
I mean, tight end is the one interesting position because Will Dissly is one of the more obvious potential places for cap savings on the roster here. When you look at, they could save about $7 million again by moving on from him, and just as versatile as Will Dissly is, given the lack of receiving production from him, that's a place where I think you're going to have to save money. And then Noah Fant is a free agent and coming off a terrific season, and it'll be interesting to see how far the Seahawks are willing to extend to bring him back. But yeah, defensively is where you have the more substantial questions because the safety position, you look at Jamal Adams with a $27 million cap hit, Quandre Diggs with a $21 million cap hit, the youth that they've drafted on that side of the ball, and then Leonard Williams and Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks all as free agents. A lot of question marks. What direction would you like to see the Seahawks take on defense, Ben?
Yeah, they're going to have to make some cuts, I think, just because of the salary cap situation and the reality of like the aging curve of some of these players. So I think like it's probably time to move on from Bobby Wagner. It's probably time to move on from Jamal Adams, who I think, regardless of how you have felt about his play on the field since becoming a Seahawk, I don't think he really has an argument for justifying the cap hit that he has. And then, yeah, there's Leonard Williams, who is a great player, but are they going to franchise tag him? I guess I would be surprised if they did, and if not, then I don't know if they're going to be outbidding the other 31 teams on him. So hopefully they'll throw resources at the position in the draft, because I think they are pretty set on the offensive side, other than like interior offensive line or other positions that you can kind of get by without as much investment on. And yeah, I think they have a lot of holes on defense. So hopefully they'll attack that in the draft and their draft picks will hit.
It's not a lot of flexibility. I mean, the money to move on from obviously Bobby being a free agent, but the two safeties, Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams, they're still having to eat a pretty huge amount of money to move on from either of those players, right? And for Jamal Adams, I think they saved 10 million.
Jamal Adams, they only saved 6 million. Now, I think the one possibility with him is that he could be designated a post June 1st cut, in which case it's 16.5 million. But the nature of that is, I think one of the reasons to not do that is, well, you still have to pay the 10 million. You're just doing it in 2025. And the Seahawks, as much as they like to talk a good game about not pushing salary cap obligations in the future, did do a lot of that last offseason. And now the bill is coming due. And I don't think it makes sense. Like last offseason, the argument was, well, look, you see what we were able to do last year in terms of getting back to the playoffs with Geno Smith as QB. We've got all these draft picks. We're right there as contenders. Like they can't sell that argument this year. They don't necessarily need to rebuild, in my opinion, but they can't be approaching it as we're selling out for the 2024 season, especially with a first-year head coach.
How do they do that if they can't approach it as selling out for the 2024 season? Doesn't that just mean bringing back those players, though?
No, I think it means eating the cap hit now so that there's no cap money whatsoever in 2025 for Adams in particular. And I mean, that could be a
it's
case
just
with
so
Lockett
little
as well.
savings for the money that you have to eat.
But I mean, Jamal Adams has Ben made no matter what you think of Jamal Adams play. Well, I do have some thoughts on Jamal Adams play, and I have a lot more thoughts on the safety market and Julian Love's contract. And they all indicate to me that Jamal Adams, the net of 6 million is not worth it, even before you set aside, the potential of pushing off the 2025 cap hit.
Yeah, if they cut him now, they would save it's 6 million this year, but they would save 18 million in 2025, and I think that would probably be worth it.
It's kind of just a brutal place to be in. I just think they're in a really difficult spot with regards to needing to add talent and then also having to pay to get off these contracts. And that was the thing that I think the Seahawks have done a very good job this offseason. Obviously, none of these coaches, literally Ryan Grubb's never coached an NFL game. Mike McDonald's never head coached an NFL game. I think they have seemingly done everything right so far in this offseason, process-wise, without things we've seen. This is still a mess that John Schneider has kind of made on the defense. And it's surprising to me how maybe we're scapegoating Pete Carroll for all of this, and John Schneider wouldn't have made these decisions. I guess we'll find out. But the situation that they are in defensively in particular, the defense is both bad and expensive and not that young. It is a complicated place to be right now for them. And I do think they're going to have to hit on some of these draft picks. They're going to need to be playing rookies next year and or be running it back with players like Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs. It's a difficult spot that they're in. And when I look at it, I went and looked at the Niners salary cap situation after their loss in the Super Bowl. And the Niners kind of just have better players for cheaper across the board. They have almost no contract that looks like the Jamal Adams contract. And Jamal Adams has kind of just been this curse on the Seahawks since they made that trade that has affected them over and over and over again and hasn't helped them. And it's going to...
Did lead to the Russell Wilson trade.
Somehow, some way, led to the Russell Wilson trade. But they are not in a good position right now. And it could make sense to just try to scrape it all off this year, help themselves out long term, like eat the dead cap or whatever. But they're going to have to hit on a lot of draft picks, and Mike McDonald is going to have to do an excellent job coaching next season.
The other interesting comparison here is what they think of what the Rams did last year, because the Rams were in this position a year ago, and everyone was like, oh, they're going to have a terrible season. Look at how youthful they are defensively around Aaron Donald. And look, the Seahawks do not have an Aaron Donald, unfortunately, but they were able to cobble together with a lot of young players and draft picks a competent enough defense to get back into the playoffs and to ultimately be better than the Seahawks last season. So it'll be interesting to see if they use that as a model. Let's go position by position, and I can share a few more thoughts there. All right, percentage chances of returning as we always do, starting at quarterback with Geno Smith. Ben?
90.
Wow. 90%. Thought I was going to be high by saying 80. I feel like I have to revise it to higher now. I'm going to also say 90%.
I'll go closest to the pin with 85%, although you did make a pretty compelling argument that Geno Smith is going to be back earlier. Drew Lock, who is a free agent.
Okay, now we're getting harder. That was fast. When the Seahawks traded for Drew Lock, it sounded like during the press conference, it sounded like Pete Carroll was the one who like really believed in Drew Lock, and the Broncos had a 4-1 record when Drew Lock started, and blah blah blah. So I'm not sure what this will look like afterwards, nor am I convinced that he showed enough during his play to command that much of a market. So maybe he'll be back. I'll say 50%. I really have no idea.
I think there's no chance of Drew Lock coming back. I'm going to say 5% chance of Drew Lock coming back.
I'll split the difference on this one and say 25%, because I think there are scenarios where it's Geno and Drew Lock again is the Seahawks two quarterbacks, but not very likely.
I also think Drew Lock has maybe improved some of his value as a backup quarterback.
I agree.
Like, I think he's probably in the top half of the league as far as backups go now.
Yeah.
And the Seahawks just don't have the money to pay that. Like, if he ends up
fair.
with a $6 million contract or something, I wouldn't be shocked if he kind of enters that. He's won big games last year and played in big games, which a lot of backup quarterbacks have not. But this to me feels like it's going to be Geno and a draft pick.
Tyler Lockett.
We talked about his cap hit and how much money would be saved by moving on for him, which is not a lot. So I'll say 70%.
I think this is also like 85.
I'm probably a little closer to Ben just because, I feel the same way about Quandre Diggs. I don't think the issue here is that their production per se or their play. It's more just like some sacrifices are going to need to be made at some point here. So I'm going to say 60% here. I'm going to be lowest on this one. Noah Fant.
Colby Parkinson's still on their roster, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I would guess that they would have Parkinson and somebody who's very cheap, and that someone is gonna.
Parkinson is a free agent as well.
Oh, okay. So they have Disley, who's very expensive, and then the other two are free agents.
I'm not gonna say they have Disley, but
yeah, agreed. I'll say for Fant, I'll say like 5%.
Wow. I'm gonna go 20% for Fant. It's a little bit harder with the unrestricted free agents, and they have to value him more than anybody else values him.
Yeah, but they already, it's not like everyone tried to trade for Noah Fant in the same way as they had Russell Wilson, and Fant happened to be one of the things the Broncos had to trade. But, famously, it's been reported the Seahawks wanted to draft Fant before he went the pick ahead of them. And I think that was the year they traded down and took Rashad Penny. Maybe I forget the exact timeline. No, I guess it had to be later than that. But they wanted him in the draft. So I'm going to say like 40% and argue that one of Fant or Lockett comes back. Okay. Leonard Williams.
This is a really interesting one. If Pete Carroll was still there, maybe I would be higher just because, well, first they went out and got him, and also it would look really bad if they spent a second round pick on him and then he left for nothing. But given that that's no longer true, I think it's probably less likely. So maybe like 33%.
I think this one's closer to like 15%. He's just going to be so expensive, and there really aren't a lot of places that the Seahawks can add that kind of money on this defense.
Yeah, I think they were more okay with him being a rental than Ben does. So I'm going to say 10%. Darrell Taylor, his rookie contract is up now, a free agent.
Wow, he's a free agent. Can't imagine he would have much of a market, but at the same time, the Seahawks don't have a lot of money, and he has not been a consistent producer in Seattle. So I'll say, I don't know, 15%.
I just don't think the Seahawks care about bringing him back, and he's not one of the guys. So I'm going to say 10%.
I think you guys talked me down. I was at 20%, but maybe I'll go 15 here, like Ben. Jordan Brooks.
I'm guessing he will have a market, and if the Seahawks let him go, then their linebacker situation is just a disaster. And a lot of people have pointed out that, oh, the Ravens have good linebackers, and Jordan Brooks is like their only competent linebacker. So maybe Mike McDonald is going to want to keep him around, which I think is moderately convincing. So I'll say like 2/3, 67%.
Wow. I think it's 50-50 on Jordan Brooks. And it really just depends on what the market is, whether the Seahawks can afford him. I think Mike McDonald would be happy to have him back, but they just don't necessarily have the money to invest in Jordan Brooks. And also maybe Mike McDonald doesn't like it. You know?
Hey, I guess he wasn't, he wasn't the defensive coordinator, obviously. This was before he went to Michigan, but he must have been around still when they were evaluating Brooks, who famously
Yep.
went just before Patrick Queen went to Baltimore. I'm going to say 65%. I'm in the same ballpark as Ben here. Bobby Wagner.
Love you, Bobby. It's been great, but it's probably time. So I'll say 15% again.
This is the only place that I'm radically different. And I think Bobby Wagner comes back on a cheap deal as just wanting to end his career here in Seattle. And I think it's like 80%.
Oh wow, we are radically different. I also am in the 15% range. I mean, I can buy wanting Bobby to stick around as a veteran presence, but you got to think they're going to want to make some changes at the linebacker level. If Brooks is back, it's not going to be him. And I guess the question is how cheap Bobby Wagner is actually willing to play before it's like, well, what's even the point? So I'm at 15% as well.
I bet there's some team that will throw money at him just because of the name Bobby Wagner and all the tackles and stuff, but we'll see.
Jamal Adams.
I'll say I was gonna say 20%. That sounds really low, but sure, let's go with that. I don't think there's any way to justify keeping him on the roster at this point.
I feel like Jamal Adams might come back. I'm gonna put it at the 50%, splitting the difference.
Wow, I'm taking the Ben picking the Chiefs in his prediction game for the Super Bowl approach here and try to take all the money. I'm going 1%. I mean,
There we
we
go.
haven't even talked about the off-field issues last year. I think that those were a bit of a black eye for the Seahawks, and if it was borderline, that's going to push them towards moving on.
I actually think the Mike McDonald change means that he's more likely to come back. If he's somebody that Mike McDonald's looking at and just like we can do something here, if he's excited about the option of coaching Jamal Adams and the other opportunity is basically eating, whatever 26 million in dead cap money, like I'd have no idea where they're going to find any money at this point. It's like Will Dissly or bust, but I think there is a chance that I actually think it is maybe more likely that Jamal Adams comes back than Quandre Diggs.
Well, he's next up if we want to move on to that.
Ben, or are you thinking?
Oh, okay. Quandre Diggs. I think he's good. He does what safeties are supposed to do, which is take away the deep middle. And the things that stick out about him that fans really don't like are like missing tackles down the field. And I think a lot of that was a reflection of how bad Seattle's defense was, where if your free safety is trying to make tackles on running backs 20 yards down the field or a wide receiver because your other quarterbacks can't tackle or something, then yeah, your free safety is going to look bad, but that's not his primary job. And if your defense were better, he wouldn't be asked to be making these plays in the first place. So I think my guess is that they will get rid of Adams and keep Diggs because turning over two safeties would be hard. I think Quandre Diggs is still a pretty good player. So I would keep him around. So I'll say 85%. And I think this is our biggest difference is what they're going to do with these two safeties.
Give me 40% on Diggs.
I'm the lowest here. I'm at 20%. Again, same logic as Lockett. I don't think it's any reflection of Diggs on is a player. It's, I mean, number one, the safety market. Like,
Yeah.
he's not going out somewhere. Even the 11 million, difference. He's not going somewhere else and getting 11 million. So I think that there's a scenario where he renegotiates and comes back as a Seahawk on a smaller contract. But sometimes that's a little more painful to make that sacrifice with the team you have been on than another team. So I'm at 20% here.
Yep.
All right, that brings us to what Ben was nervous about at the start of this. Revisiting our over-under picks for the 2023 NFL season.
Did we do a winner on percentage chances for the Seahawks returning? Did we already do that?
Yeah, we did it at the end of the
I-
offseason. Ben did win that, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, the Arizona Cardinals had a line of 4.5 wins. We all took the under. They won 4 games. The Atlanta Falcons had a line of 8.5 wins. Tristan and I went under. Ben had the over lock.
Good process.
How many did they end up winning?
They won 7 games.
Okay, they got close, but yeah. So the process was their schedule would be really easy. That part was true.
Yep.
But they also did not have a quarterback, and now Arthur Smith is gone. So probably not a good process there.
The multiple Ravens had a line of 9.5. We all took the over. They, of course, won 13 games. So that was an easy victory. Buffalo had a line of 10.5 wins. We all took the over there. Had to sweat that one out for a long period of time had we known what our picks were. But they did ultimately, with their late surge, get to 11 wins. We were all correct. Carolina, a line of 7.5 wins.
What? Oh, because they play in the
God.
Yeah, all the NFC South teams had really high over-unders because the division is terrible. But
they had won 7 games the year before and then added Bryce Young. That 7.5 line, they won 2 games. We all had the under here.
Oh, thank
When
God.
we all agree, you should maybe listen to us. The Chicago Bears had a line of 7.5 wins. We all took the under. I made this a lock. I was feeling terrific about this in November. It got a little dicier than I expected, but they ended up winning 7 games and hitting.
Have you
the
missed
under.
one yet? Have you and I missed one yet? Or are we undefeated so far?
We are undefeated so far. This streak
Wow.
will continue for a while.
Yeah, 32 for 32.
The Cincinnati Bengals had a line of 11.5 wins. We all liked the under here. With Joe Burrow's injury, they ended up winning 9 games. Cleveland Browns.
Shout out to Jake Browning. Sorry.
Oh, did nothing
Is
wrong.
Jake Browning a free agent, by the way? I assume he has to be, right?
I don't think he's accrued enough service to be like a full free agent yet, though. I would guess he's like exclusive rights or at best restricted.
So looking at just a Jake Browning conversation for a second, Ben.
Yeah, he's
Looking at some of the
exclusive
stats
rights.
that you've posted about EPA, right?
Yep.
Jake Browning statistically was like the 12th best quarterback in the league last year, something like that.
Yeah, I think
Do we feel like
it's very interesting because it raises the question, or at least to me, the primary question this raises is to what extent is Joe Burrow's production, because he has absolutely incredible wide receivers in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and perhaps what Joe Callahan, I think was the name of their offensive coordinator, he now got hired to coach. I can't keep all these coaching hires straight,
Titans.
but some other team. Oh yeah, the Titans, which I think is a very interesting hire for them. So
It's Brian Callahan, for the record.
Sorry, Brian. A lot of Callahans. And I thought it was very surprising that Jake Browning, as much as I loved him in University of Washington, it was an incredibly fun season. That season that John Ross had however many touchdowns and they scored. That was the 70 points against Oregon season, right? I did not think that, like, after all his shoulder injuries and his arm strength and everything, that he was cut out to be an NFL quarterback. And I think clearly he is. He showed that he can play in this level. I think there's a question of whether that would translate outside of like the best receiver room in the NFL and whether we should revise our thoughts about Joe Burrow. But yeah, I think this is one of the most interesting parts of what happened this NFL season for me.
It would be interesting if someone with a less settled quarterback position makes a run at him, because
That's what I was gonna say. We talked about Kirk, Russ, Jameis, quarterbacks like that. That's kind of like the market. Maybe Geno. Jake Browning, is he a
Yeah.
Gardner Minshew? Gardner Minshew, I think, is also a free agent. Like having both of those two players out there on the market as like fringe, maybe this could be your starter if you have a rookie quarterback type
Drew
players.
Lock.
But Jake Browning's kind of entered that territory. Drew Lock too. There are a lot of interesting quarterbacks out there.
Yep.
Would you rather have Jake Browning for like $6 million or Kyler Murray?
Oh man. Kyler Murray is like, he has a very, very large contract. The film people love him for reasons I don't fully understand. And his offensive production has never been like commensurate with like his reputation and how much money he's getting paid now and everything. I think before, so there's always like a reason you can talk yourself into the production not being there. Before, he had Cliff Kingsbury as his offensive coordinator. Thoughts with the Washington Commanders now. And now he's like, this past season, he was coming off an ACL injury, so maybe he wasn't 100%. But if we go through another season with like middling production based on his contract and where the Cardinals are, and even with Josh Dobbs like looking completely fine in that offense, I think it's hard to like make an argument that he's one of the top like 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, which is where a lot of people put him, I think.
Josh Dobbs also out there. Another interesting one, right?
I would like if the Jets went out and got Jake Browning. It
But
was Aaron Rodgers and
Browning's
Jake Browning.
he's exclusive right, so he's gonna make nothing next year. That's part of the appeal of Jake Browning, is it's not even gonna be $6 million.
Great. All right. Okay, who's next?
All right, Cleveland, a line of 9.5 wins. Speaking of intriguing quarterbacks, Joe Flacco is out there. We all took the under on this one. They had an awesome defense and won 11 games, so the streak ends
You
here.
said 9.5, and I still thought we were right.
They won a lot of games, man.
I think that was good process. You can't predict outlier good defense, and their offense was pretty terrible. So I'm patting ourselves on the back for that.
There you go. Dallas Cowboys had a line of 10 wins. We all liked the over here. Ben made this one of his locks. They won 12 games. We all hit again. Denver Broncos, a line of 8.5 wins. Tristan and I both liked the over. Ben had the under. Who knows if they had played Russell Wilson all season, how it would have worked out. But they ended up with 8 wins here. Ben gets this one.
You said that was 8.5?
Yeah.
And they went 8-9.
Yeah.
They like actively tried not to win that ninth game.
That is correct. Detroit Lions had a line of 9.5 wins. I was still in my Lions skepticism phase. I took the under here. Tristan and Ben had the over. Obviously, they won 12 games. Beat everyone but the Seahawks. Green Bay had a line of 7.5 wins after the departure of Aaron Rodgers. We all like the over here. I made this one of my locks. And this one didn't seem so hot in October, but a strong finish. They finished with 9 wins, easily covered this one. Houston Texans, a line of 6.5 wins. Ben and I went under here. Tristan went over. I don't know if our process was sound. The other rookie quarterbacks didn't do too hot, but CJ Stroud, obviously terrific. They won 10 games, hit the over.
It was clearly my knowledge of who Bobby Slowick was.
The Indianapolis Colts had a line of 6.5 wins. Speaking of rookie quarterbacks, although it seems like forever ago that Anthony Richardson played football, we all took the under on 6.5 wins.
Wow.
According to this, both Tristan and Ben took it as a lock. It seems like that can't possibly be true, that you both had it as a lock. But they won 9 games and crushed this line.
It's actually kind of fascinating because I feel like had Anthony Richardson not gotten hurt, they might have been under. But because it was, they were 13th in offensive DVOA, and a lot of that has to go to Gardner Minshew.
Richardson individually, I guess, was playing pretty well. I can't remember what the team's record was in the games that he started. They were 2-2 in the games he started. I think Minshew relieved in a considerable part of one of those, but it's not like they were off to a terrible start or something. All right, the Jacksonville Jaguars had a line of 10 wins. I had the under. Tristan and Ben had the over here. They finished 9-8, so I take this one. Kansas City Chiefs had a line of 11.5 wins. I took the under. Tristan and Ben took the over. Even though the Kansas City Chiefs are Super Bowl champions, they won 11 games during the regular season, so I got this one. Las Vegas Raiders, a line of 6.5 wins. We all liked the over here. They won 8 games. Los Angeles Chargers, 9.5. We all liked the over here.
Wow.
How young and naive we once were about the LA Chargers, who went 5-12. The Los Angeles Rams had a line of 6.5 wins. Tristan and I took the under on this one. Even though I had previously boldly predicted they'd win the NFC West in 2023 before their offseason makeover, Ben did take the over, and wisely so, as they won 10 games. Miami Dolphins, a line of 9.5 wins. Ben and I took the under on this one. Apparently, the statistical projections were not that high on Miami. Tristan took the over. They won 11 games. Minnesota Vikings, a line of 8.5 wins. Tristan took the over and made this one a lock. Ben also took it over. I had an under here.
The most frustrating lock, right?
Yeah. They were well on their way to hitting the over when Kirk Cousins was injured, but finished with 7 wins. New England Patriots.
You argued the process was right.
Good process.
Every time we've been wrong, we've argued that. Look,
I'm not so sure on the Chargers. I'm not sure if the process is right on the Chargers.
The New England Patriots, believe it or not, had a line of 7.5 wins, and I took the over on that one. Tristan and Ben had the under. They went 4-13. New Orleans Saints had a line of 9.5 wins, and Tristan and I both went over on this one. Ben went under. They finished 9-8. Speaking of lines that look preposterous in hindsight, the New York Giants, 7.5 wins. We all took the under here. They went 6-11. We all won. New York Jets, a line of 9.5 wins, and we all took the over on it.
Oh no!
Good process. How could we have known?
No,
Aaron
they went 7-10 with Rodgers getting hurt in the first series.
I mean, their defense was quite good. And Zach Wilson was Zach Wilson. Philadelphia Eagles, a line of 11.5 wins. We all liked the under here. We weren't feeling so hot about it early. But as soon as baby's fantasy genius jumped on the bandwagon, things went south in Philadelphia.
Thank you, Drew Lock.
Yeah, there you go. That's Drew Lock's enduring contribution. Pittsburgh Steelers had a line of 9 wins. Tristan and I took the over. Ben took the under. They went 10-7.
And how did they win 10 games?
That was the crazy. I was looking up all these teams where I was like, what pick do the Steelers have? And I was like, it must be like 12 or something. And I was like, oh, they made the playoffs this year? That happened?
They beat the Seahawks to make the playoffs. A loser leaves town, basically. San Francisco 49ers had a line of 10.5 wins. Somehow I was the only one that went over on this one.
Wow.
They won 12 games. Seattle Seahawks had a line of 9 wins. I went under. Tristan and Ben went over. And we have no action, as they were the one and only push on the board this year.
Fair enough.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a line of 6.5 wins. We all liked the over. Shouts to Baker Mayfield. They won 9 games. Tennessee had a line of 7.5 wins. We all took the over, and Tristan made this one a lock. Defend your process here.
I don't even know what. Wait, what was the line? 7.5?
Yeah.
I thought they would be one of those teams. Like, we all took the over on like the Raiders or something, right? Where you're just like, they kind of just found their way to the over. That's what I thought the Titans would be. I didn't imagine.
If you thought the Colts were going to be terrible and the Texans to be terrible, then maybe there would have been enough wins there for the Titans, but it didn't turn out that way for them.
The Washington Commanders had a line of 6.5 wins. They did not find their way to the over, despite Tristan and I both taking it. Ben wins this one as they went 4-13. So the final results here, again, remember there's one push, so it was out of 31. I had 18. Tristan had 18. Ben had 18.
Okay.
Everybody wins. Everybody hits.
All did quite well. Ben did have the best return on if you had bet $100 on each or any amount. Ben brought made 8.4% on his money. Tristan made 7.8%. I only made 6.5%.
I think that's pretty good, even on a down year for us. Like we've done much better in the past. In our worst year, we're still making money, so we can keep doing this.
And there were 17 teams on which all three of us agreed. We went 12 of 17 on those ones. So
Did you listen back to this? Did you listen to
I
our
didn't.
process for the Raiders over? Okay, I'm so curious what might have possessed
I think
us
we
to think
Jimmy G. We all love
yeah,
Jimmy
that's
G.
a good point.
I mean,
I'll take it.
I think it was so low. People were too down on them. Our locks this year were not very strong. Ben went 1 of
Yeah.
3 on his locks. Tristan was 0 for 3 on his locks.
0 for 3. Wait, I had which ones? The Vikings,
the Colts. Again, I don't know for sure if
Titans.
and then Titans.
Man,
I was 2 for 2 on my NFC North locks. So kudos to me on that one.
before you wrap this up, I want to talk Super Bowl for 1 second because I think this affects the division that we're in. And Ben, you were watching the game on Sunday, right?
Yep.
What were your thoughts about Kyle Shanahan and some of the decision making that's happened in that game? Because I saw a lot of people being like, oh, players didn't know how the overtime rules would work. And to me, I see that and I'm like, it doesn't matter whether players knew how the overtime rules worked or not. They still kicked a field goal in the end. Like they would have lost either way. But some of Kyle Shanahan's decisions, like what were your thoughts going into that game and as the game was unfolding about some of the decision making?
Yeah, I think so. Before I criticize Shanahan, I do want to applaud him for going for, I think it was like a 4th and 3 in the red zone where a lot of times in the
Monster.
past he would have kicked a field goal there and he ended up going for it and that was one of their touchdowns. So personal growth, that's good, or at least if you're a 49ers fan. But I think he's still so conservative for somebody who's like, they have a great offense, he's a great offensive play caller, and the example that comes to mind is how he managed the end of the first half, which reminded me so much of what he did at the end of the first half in the last Super Bowl against the Chiefs, which was like the Chiefs had the ball. I think there was like, it was definitely under the 2-minute warning, maybe a minute left or something. And the Chiefs ran a play and the 49ers just did not call a timeout. And as a result, the 49ers didn't really have a chance to march down the field. And I don't know if this is like, people say it's because he doesn't trust his quarterback, but I don't know if that's it, because at least this year he's shown more willingness to pass the ball, go for it on 4th down, like put the ball in Brock Purdy's hands. I think he's just like really conservative, and I guess if you're a head coach, it's just so easy to think about what could go wrong. Am I going to regret what happens if I do this aggressive thing? And as a result, you just kind of default to what is more conservative. And I think that's his biggest weakness as a like game manager. Like he's a great coach. Their offense is great. Struggled a little bit more in the Super Bowl than I expected, although I think Brock Purdy played perfectly adequately and is like, he's definitely the guy for them and is still making less than $1 million, which is part of the reason why the 49ers cap situation looks so good relative to the Seahawks. That was a very long answer that maybe partially answered your question.
Did you when the coin toss happens?
Oh yeah,
in that moment when they elect to take the ball, were you just like, they screwed it up?
No, I think like all these people have run their own calculations and simulations and everybody gets pretty close to 50%. And I tried to do it myself and I also got pretty close to 50%. And the assumption here is that there's 2 really good offenses playing each other. So I had originally done this after that like Bills Chiefs 13-second game, which motivated the rules change to see, okay, if this rule were in place, what would be the optimal decision? Do you want the ball first or second? And if you have 2 really good offenses, first, if you have 2 bad offenses or average offenses, then you definitely want the ball first, because the only time it's really beneficial to have the ball second is if both teams score a touchdown, because then you're going to be going for 2 to end the game and there's not going to be a third possession. Whereas if both teams score a field goal or if both teams don't score at all, then you want to be the team that had the ball first, because then you're going to get the ball in a third possession and can end the game. So the better the offenses are and the better your 2-point conversion is, the more that would push you to have the ball second. So I can definitely see the argument for taking the ball second, but I don't think taking the ball first in and of itself is roast worthy. I think it looked bad that it seemed like all these 49er players were talking about not knowing the rules, and I don't think it really reflects how they should be playing, but it is a little bit crazy that they didn't even know what the rules were and then were so willing to tell other people about this afterwards.
That's very strange. Do you think they should have gone for that fourth down, given the rules, that they should have gone for that fourth down instead of kicking the field goal?
I think you could definitely make the argument there, and I'm guessing part of the reason they didn't was because like the play was great. They had a wide open receiver in the end zone, but they just could not block Chris Jones. And maybe Shanahan saw that. It was like, I'm not risking my whole season on one play where my offensive line is having so much trouble. And again, this is very conservative thinking, but this is like the things that coaches talk themselves into. I think there's a very good argument that they should have gone for it there, because the probability of holding the Chiefs to a field goal, I guess it's not zero, but the Chiefs are going to be very, very incentivized to not be settling for a field goal, because they know that if they do kick a field goal, then the 49ers get the ball with sudden death, which is not a situation they want. So how much do you trust your defense that is very tired at this point to stop Patrick Mahomes? Probably not a lot. So that maybe that should push you towards trying to score a touchdown.
All right. I definitely felt like in hindsight, the more that I've thought about the game, I felt like the best player on the field and the person who maybe even affected the game almost the most of anybody. Obviously, it's Mahomes, but like Trent McDuffie.
Oh yeah, he was awesome. Yep,
so good in that game against them. And you talked about how the Niners struggled. Like just Trent McDuffie shutting everything down in the plays that he made in the end zone, the pass rush on the huge third down play at the end of the fourth quarter. Like it was such a monster game from Trent McDuffie, which was pretty cool to see. And now the Niners, after losing the Super Bowl, what they get is those extra games in the schedule. And I think, the Seahawks, that third place schedule, their extra games are the Falcons and then home against the Giants and home against the Broncos. And the Niners get the Cowboys, the Chiefs again, and the Buccaneers in those same 3 games. So it is very nice to have that third place schedule for Mike Macdonald and the Seahawks going forward.
Yeah, it's one of the ways that the NFL ensures parity. So as we record this, I am looking outside my window. There is snow still on the ground that fell on Thursday morning in the Seattle area. But believe it or not, we are less than 7 months away from recording a season preview pod with Ben. Obviously, plenty of off-season activity to go, and we'll see which of the players we have forecast are going to be back or not back. That ends up being the case. But Ben, thanks as always for joining us.
Yep, glad we finally fit this in a little bit after the season ended this time.
All right, with that in the books, time to get to the regular podcast.
How long was that in the books?
Oh, it's well over an hour. Close to an hour.
It's
15.
like, okay, now we pick back up with the toasts.
So we're trending towards a 2.5 hour podcast here. But fortunately, there's not a lot of UW football news this week.
I've got thoughts.
Oh, please don't.
I have to give a few thoughts.
Oh, you always have to give thoughts.
There are some transfers as well, aren't there? There are a few transfers.
There are 2 transfers. The last 2 for now, although UCLA, the 30-day window has opened up for the Bruins. There's some other movement. All right, toasts. We start with congratulations to Bobby Wagner. The NFL's 2023 Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award winner is named at last Thursday's NFL honors. So a terrific honor there for Bobby Wagner. Congrats to former Seahawk Devin Hester, part of the 2024 Pro Football Hall of Fame class.
Why are you just saying former Seahawk Devin Hester and not saying former Seahawk Dwight Freeney?
I gotta say, I missed that entirely. Wow.
Only Devin Hester?
I didn't even realize that Dwight Freeney was part of the class. Who played more games in a Seahawks uniform, Dwight Freeney or Devin Hester?
Oh, it has to be Freeney.
Did he play a full season?
No, he didn't play a full season, but he played like a full chunk.
He played 4 games.
Yeah, a full chunk of games. Wait, am I wrong about this? I swear there were 2 Seahawk legends. Where's the freaking class? Why am I not finding this? I should Google that and it should just be right there.
Although Devin Hester, I guess, wait, did he not play in the regular season in 2017? Only in the playoffs?
Yeah, it's Dwight Freeney was part of it. Okay. You
Well,
had me for a second there questioning.
No, I mean, I wasn't saying that like you're wrong. I was saying that like I didn't even pay attention to it.
You didn't even notice that there were 2 Seahawk legends
I
who were
didn't.
enshrined into the Hall of Fame. Well,
Devin Hester played 2 games for the Seahawks, and yet still incredibly more memorable tenure with the Seahawks because of the 5 returns for 194 yards. There was the touchdown called back, right, against Atlanta.
not a touchdown, I don't think. I think he got to like the 4-yard line.
Okay. So, shouts to Devin Hester and shouts also to Dwight Freeney.
They both had, they both made some plays. I remember Dwight Freeney making some plays.
Dwight Freeney recorded 3 sacks for the Seahawks, so
In
he definitely
4
made
games?
some plays. Yeah.
Like literally right now, if you told me Darrell Taylor or Dwight Freeney at
Were-
this moment, I'd be like,
Were they on this?
I don't
So
know.
they were on the same team. Although it doesn't look like Freeney
no,
played in the
opposite
playoffs
ends
that
of
year.
the season. They released Dwight Freeney.
But they were on the team the same year.
But Devin Hester wasn't
Oh.
signed until after Dwight Freeney was gone.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying it was the same season.
Okay.
I don't know what's so hard.
Well,
to
you're making it
understand
seem like
about
they
that.
were teammates, but if you're not on the team at the same time, 2 different times of the season doesn't make you teammates.
Well, I said that Devin Hester played only in the playoffs and Dwight Freeney did not play in the playoffs. So by definition, they did not play together.
There you go.
All right, congrats to Storm coach Noel Quinn in Canada, as well as Brazil tournament MVP Ezzy Megbagor, Jade Melbourne, Sammy Whitcomb, and
Melbourne.
Lauren Jackson in Australia on earning spots in this summer's Olympic Games at the Olympic qualifying tournaments held last weekend. But sad news.
Oh no.
LJ announced her retirement from the national team
What?
ahead of the Olympics, noting that she would finish her career playing in Brazil as part of the qualifying tournament after Australia won its lone major title there in the 2016 FIBA World Championships, with Jackson starring.
She's retiring after the qualifying tournament?
Decided not to go with the team to Paris.
But
So-
is willing to go to Brazil? I guess that is a shorter flight from Australia. I don't even
Well,
know.
apparently they had a harrowing, according to Sammy Whitcomb's social media, it was like supposed to be a 24-hour travel day back, and then it turned into a 36-hour or something like that.
Oh no.
So like literally a full day of travel. So I don't know. I think it was more just at this stage of her career and knowing how long she'd have to be away from her family with the Olympics. I think those were probably the factors. But still able to do it on her terms. And look, we thought Lauren went out with the national team when they hosted the World Cup a couple of years ago in 2022, and found new life.
She'll be
in her
back.
new life.
She'll be back. Lauren Jackson's retired once and she could do it again.
There were 3 qualifying tournaments.
Unretired once and she could do it again.
There were 3 qualifying tournaments last weekend. Emma Miesemann, who is not in the WNBA currently by her choice, was the MVP in Belgium, where the USA played. But in 2 of the other 2 tournaments, it was a member of the 2023 Storm was the MVP, because Gabby Williams, now a free agent, was the MVP of the tournament in Xi'an, playing for France, which had already qualified as the host country.
And think of the noodles.
Yes. Also, congrats to Pac-12 Freshman of the Week, Jaden Glab, who opened her UW softball career with a home run and 6 RBI in the Puerto Vallarta College Challenge, earning all tournament team honors as the Huskies went 3-1.
There we go. Who was the one freshman? There was a freshman a couple of years ago who came
Olivia
out
Johnson.
Was that Olivia Johnson, who just monster in like the first 3 games or whatever?
Yeah, and we were like, oh, this immediate superstar for the Huskies. And then, had a fine freshman season, but was in and out of these. Yeah, and I guess she started 47 games, so that was it.
It was like Shane Spencer like. We were so excited about it.
Opened the season 7 for 7 with 3 home runs, 8 RBI, and 7 walks. 5 intentional walks. So, yeah, the strong start does not always carry over, but some pretty good competition the Huskies played. We'll talk more about that later. But for now, it is time for us to begin our search for Seattle's best cookie without you.
I just like you started this. I get the notes and I see that I've been written out of the cookie search. I went there, I read for the part, I had the idea for it, and in the end, I watched it, and they were like, "There's no part for Tristan anymore in the cookie search."
Did Costanza wanted to be cast as himself when they did the Seinfeld show on Seinfeld?
Kramer.
Oh, Kramer. Okay, yeah. But
Yeah,
Kramer
I'm
didn't have
Kramer.
the idea. So it's not exactly the same. So our first entrant here, and to me,
Your first entrant.
a
This
co-leading.
cannot be Seattle's best cookie.
Well, we'll have to discuss that.
We're gonna have to have all sorts of pluralization and tenses and winners.
Is the cookie from Met Market, which I learned a little bit about the history of reading up on this. Met Market grew out of the Queen Anne Thriftway originally,
Okay.
rebranding to its current name in 2003, not long before they moved from their location. They were on the top of Queen Anne Hill
Oh.
to their current location in the formerly
Ah.
Larry's Market there on Mercer Street.
Well, there are
very near where
multiple
both of
Met
us
Markets
worked.
now. That's not the only Met Market, but that's
Right,
that's
but
like
that's
the flagship Met Market.
Exactly.
When somebody says Met Market to you and me, that's what we see.
I mean, now to me, I see the Fauntleroy Met Market because that is my home Met Market. But there are 10 locations throughout the Seattle area of Met Market. The cookies history, according to their website, it all started when our founder, Terry Helverson, walked down a particular Manhattan street. The chocolate and butter-rich aroma of cookies fresh from the oven wafted into the street, past a line of customers progressing towards its source. After tasting that cookie, Helverson decided that Metropolitan Market would sell a cookie of its own. One is good. No, even better than the one he had that day. Inspiration may have come quickly, but perfecting the cookie was not to be rushed. Our bakery specialist at the time stepped up to the challenge of developing the recipe, and after countless test batches, they found the secret. More chocolate. Nearly half the total cookie weight is in chocolate. Is the final recipe boasts not just one, but two different types of Calaba, I have no idea how to pronounce that word, Belgian-style chocolate in the mix. Toasted walnuts add complementary flavor and texture, as does the sprinkle of fine French sea salt that's finished on top before baking. And obviously those toasted walnuts also render you, as someone who is allergic to tree nuts, unable to eat the cookie.
Probably allergic to tree nuts.
You
I've
might
lost
want to
the
get
paperwork.
You might want to get tested on this
The
one.
Peltoncast has made me be tested for nut allergies once, and I'm not against doing it again. If I
Also, they have
to
a
eat this
secondary
cookie-
version. Not this isn't in fact a factory for you, but for the allergenic standpoint, they have a secondary version that is peanut butter.
Are you? Oh, but it still has the walnuts.
I believe so. I'd have to double check on that.
Because I could eat the peanut butter one. All right, so tell me about the stupid cookie.
So
I'm already biased against it for what it's worth.
when I was on dating apps, I had on my profile, it's suggested by Mrs. Fantasy Genius, join me in my search for Seattle's best cookie because it was something that the Peltoncast had
Are
not
you
yet.
kidding me? Right now with this, I'm like, it's time that we do the search for Seattle's best cookie, and you're like, I think that's a pretty stupid idea. And then you're like, well, of course, on my dating apps, I said that I was searching for Seattle's best cookie, and I started the search without you.
I was gone all week.
This
It was the
search has
easiest
become a
cookie for me to
sham
get.
faster than any search we've done. Before even, like, there are ones that never even really got off the ground, but somehow the
More of
cookie
a-
search has been ruined by you, good sir.
More of a sham than our Seattle search for most Seattle person.
That's
So
gonna,
anyway,
someday we're gonna finish the search for Seattle's most Seattle person.
I think I'm vetoing the search for Seattle's most Seattle person. So people often replied that Met Market was their favorite cookie to this message.
Shows the
And
type of people you were dating.
well, my girlfriend was one of those people.
That said the Met Market
Yes.
replied with the cookie. Okay.
Yes. So be careful, is what I'm saying here. Be careful. I had only had it once prior to, this coming up, and I'd had it at a friend's house. I gotta say, I was kind of unimpressed.
Did you have
It
it
didn't-
warm?
I think so, because like they went to the grocery store and brought back cookies, so it had to be pretty warm. My friend whose house was at lives right down the street from the Fauntleroy Met Market. So, it was like less than 5 minutes away. But I don't remember it being particularly great. But I had it last, I guess this was, yeah, last May, I think was the second time that I had it. And at that point, my eyes were open to
Okay.
the beauty of the Met Market cookies. So I think, look, there's going to be a lot of factors that we're going to encounter in our taxonomy of cookies as we
Yeah.
do this search with an indeterminate end date.
I was thinking, what do we think about? Do we have plans in April? Whole month?
It's free for me. Now, are you thinking of maybe
Peltoncast
saving a
live,
date?
April 19th.
Uh, is the draft the 25th?
The draft is the 25th.
All right.
I'm
We can
I
save the
haven't talked to anybody. I haven't
we
talked to
can save the
Belltown.
date.
Yeah, I haven't gotten out my nautical hat for Belltown Yacht Club, but feels like the place.
Your
I don't know.
finest nautical attire. All right. Well,
We announced last year really early. We
we
announced
did.
our live show in like January last year.
It was a good idea.
Our
We want to
booking
give
agent will
people
be
lead
happy
time.
about that.
The key factor to me for what makes a good cookie. Some people like the crunch, but at the risk of getting into your wet bread territory,
Mhm.
to me, a gooey cookie is by far the best.
It's the gooey middle, of course. Crunchy on the outside, crunchy around the edges, because if it's too soft, it'll fall apart. That hurts the integrity of the cookie. But you want a little bit of crunch, a little bit of resistance in what the what would you call the outside of the cookie?
The shell,
The shell of the
the
cookie?
exterior.
The exterior, okay, a little bit of crunchy resistance in the exterior, and then tons of warm, gooey goodness on the inside.
It's interesting because it reminds me a lot of the way Jordan McKay described good ribs to us when we were doing our ill-fated search for Seattle's best barbecue.
What's the difference, right? I mean, it's not like if one food is good one way, other foods are good that way as well. Um, it's almost like donuts. Like to me, I had some punchkis, right? Because it was just Mardi Gras. And there was the gooey inside. I got cream cheese ones. There was the gooey inside, right? And I was like, this is beautiful. They weren't like insanely fresh, but they were still gooey on the inside. And I think that's what you need because Seattle's best cookie, in my opinion, can't only be good when it's warm because cookies have to be good. It could be a cookie place that only has one good cookie, like Met Market, as far as I can tell, right? But you have to be able to let it transfer for a little bit. It can't be like it immediately loses its high end quality right after it's warm. I don't think, but
All right,
also
well,
warm and gooey is pretty nice.
let's detour into donuts for a second because I had fresh donuts 2 days in a row in
Donuts
Hawaii.
every day.
Not every day,
You were on
but
the search for Hawaii's best donut.
I think the listeners, Third Pelton Brothers, Zach Chappelle has come up a couple of times on this podcast already. Did that last year when he was in Hawaii during our search. I forget what island he was on, but had fresh donuts at the Sunrise Cafe that were kind of traditional and just like dipped in frosting that were quite delicious. And then the next day had freshly made malasadas
Oh
at
yeah.
Passion Bakery Cafe in Kauai, and that was just top notch. I've had many malasadas here, and they're terrific. We talked about last year. That's kind of my favorite style of donut, but having them like just made fresh, incredible. So, anyways, back to cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah, the gooiness is the key factor, and I do not think you will find a gooier cookie than a fresh, warm the cookie at Met Market. It may be too gooey for your taste because it does crumble and fall apart pretty considerably because there's so much chocolate in there. It's also going to be a very messy experience eating the cookie because of that. But I I still think the ingredients are well proportioned. To me, it is up there with any cookie that I have eaten in the city of Seattle going into this search.
Okay.
So I don't know what we do with it. I think you raise a fair point that even though the cookie is widely available, uh, it doesn't suffer from the issue of what was Seattle's best donut?
Flower box.
Yeah. the fact that it's not available to those with certain food allergies does seem to potentially raise at least an asterisk here.
Okay, well, it's good to start any search with an asterisk.
Do you have a particular type of cookie you'd like us to try for next week's pod? Hello Robin would be pretty feasible, I suppose, for me at this point.
I can go anywhere. I can get any cookie at any place.
Okay. You want to do Hello Robin then?
I'm totally down with Hello Robin. I'm also down to knock off a couple of them.
All right. Well, we'll continue talking about it. But if you're eating along with us, which you obviously weren't able to do it this week, was sort of last minute the decision to get the cookie.
For me too. I didn't know. I just showed up for work one day.
Did you consider this work? I guess you did just book the podcast, so you were working
most
on
weeks
that.
it is work.
Oh wow. Continuing on the food topic, Lil Woody's Seattle Burger Month continues this week with the Bremerton Burger from Connor Cronin of Darkolinos, featuring crispy copa, roasted shimeji mushrooms, Gruyere cheese, XO sauce, garlic aioli, pickled red onions, and cilantro atop a traditional burger patty. Per Connor Cronin, inspiration for this burger comes directly from my earliest memories growing up in Bremerton. Growing up on the Puget Sound, I'd spend plenty of time combing the beaches looking for agates and sand dollars, crabs, and starfish. It's these smells and flavors that I wanted to incorporate into my burger, which is a spin on the classic and my favorite mushroom Swiss burger. I chose to utilize an XO sauce to achieve the incorporation of flavors from the sea. Traditionally, XO sauce is a very luxurious and expensive sauce to create, often utilizing dried scallops, shrimp, and cured ham. My version omits the scallops and features prosciutto scraps from Darkolinos. While Bremerton is about as blue collar as they come, the natural beauty of the Puget Sound meeting the Olympic Mountains always struck me as an interesting contrast. That contrast is what I am trying to capture with my Bremerton burger: simple, classic, blue collar, but elevated in execution and flavor, which is most definitely a main tenet of my approach to my cooking style in general.
What'd you think?
I haven't had it yet.
Oh, I thought you went and had it today.
I had hoped to, but time-wise, it did not work. I ended up at Linda's Tavern for the first time in a very long time tonight instead. But so I'll have that tomorrow and post about it on Instagram.
Linda's is right there. You kind of have to go.
And they were able to get us in and out in time for the movie we were going to Dune 1 at the Egyptian.
That was Dune, by the way. Should I watch that movie?
Probably it's a notable movie, and it's going to be all the talk with part 2 coming out soon. But I can't say sci-fi epics that aren't Star Wars aren't really my favorite.
Fair enough. I have watched so many bad movies in these last couple of months. I've watched National Lampoon's Van Wilder, Click starring Adam Sandler. Oh my God, what was the worst? Oh, Couples Retreat. That was definitely the worst movie that I've watched. And even then, after all of those things, I still couldn't make it through Asteroid City.
Oh wow, that's your review. Well, stay tuned for our Academy Awards pod coming soon. But now, instead, we turn our attention to Coach's Corner.
Yeah, we were back for the first time. I will say that this week of coaching, I was called both not the best coach in the world, third best coach in the world, and the worst coach in the world by different people. That was even earlier today that I was called the worst coach in the world by not my child, by a different child.
Search for Seattle's worst coach.
Done to that kid. They found him. It wasn't a search for Seattle's best coach. It was a search for the third best coach. I guess I was of the coaches named. I'll have you guess who they were in a second. But none of them were from Seattle, as you can imagine. So we got back at it, right? We had a week off, and I was kind of bummed about not coaching for a week, because it's nice every Saturday having that as like Saturday morning. You wake up, go coach basketball. It's a little bit of like, I like coaching basketball and it's fun, but at the same time, you kind of have like church vibes to it, where you're like, when that's done, now I can get on with my weekend. But so to have it back, 9:15 a.m., we're in there. My team is showing up, and the other team, I'm like, there might not be another team, which I would be very annoyed about if we showed up and weren't able to play a game. Trickling in, they had 5 players, the other team that we were playing. So
my team is on the floor.
They had no substitutions, which for me, honestly, you give me the 5 right players. That's who I want out there.
Right.
But we start this game, And I'm like, okay, we're gonna run this game. We've got this, right? Watching them warm up, I'm like, we're good. And we can't hit anything in this game in the first half. Nobody is rebounding. I'm sitting there. This is actually the most frustrated that I was with the team. I seem like outwardly like I'm going to be getting angry at the games, and secretly I am just sitting there. It's all on the inside. If I'm getting upset, I'm sitting there. I'm positive, right? One kid made a basket who hasn't scored all year, and I jumped out of my seat excited for him. I'm nothing but excited and positive for the kids. But on the inside,
I believe the expression is pumped and jacked. Is it win forever style, coach?
Oh, I was pumped. I was pumped and jacked. When Harold scored, I jumped out of my seat. I fist pumped. I was so hyped. We were all excited for Harold to score that basket. But the other team is just like hitting all this nonsense. We're not rebounding. We're not defending. Nothing is going in. And they're not keeping score, but I could tell that we're down by a pretty significant margin. And I'm so frustrated. And our best player is leaving at halftime. It happens. It doesn't happen to some of the other best coaches in the world.
Birthday party?
It kind of happened to a brothers basketball game in Tacoma.
Wow. Oh, that's a bummer to lose out to a different basketball game.
He's in like select basketball. Like he's playing good basketball in a tournament. So he's leaving at halftime. And I'm like, okay, we got to maximize everything we're doing in the first half while he's there. We have to get a big lead while he's there. We go into halftime. It is miserable, right? We're down probably, I don't know, something like 12 points, which for first graders is an almost insurmountable lead. Third quarter starts. I've got like a pretty good defensive lineup out there. And I'm like, I feel good about this lineup. I've dialed up. Everybody has to play basically the equal amount of time. But if you don't have a full set of kids, then some players can play multiple quarters. And so I was like, I had it set up so that Mateo was playing 3 quarters. He was playing both the third and the fourth quarter. And third quarter starts, and I noticed something. It was hard to tell. You kind of have to feel out the other teams, right? We don't have extensive scouting reports. So far, I have not Connor Stallion sat in the crowd, watched any of their games, videotaped them.
If you got on the other sideline, I'd be really impressed.
I noticed that there was one kid who wasn't really defending. He was kind of just standing there. And in fact, we practiced this earlier today in practice. I was like, we had 9 kids. And I was like, instead of having an adult fill in or like Luca fill in as the 10th kid, I was like, we're playing 5-on-4 because almost every week we play 5-on-4 in some situation. And we have to be able to find the open man. The team with 4 beat the team with 5 in practice. So that's kind of where we're at right now in our ability to find the open man. But so I see that this one kid is just like not defending. It's fine. And Mateo is the one who he's playing against. And so sometimes I pull kids over during the game because I'm like, whatever, they can miss 30 seconds of a defensive possession. And I'm like, Mateo, come here. I'm like, this kid who's defending you he's just standing there. I'm like, every time you get the ball, drive to the hoop and score. I'm like, just get to, because he's pretty good at scoring if there's no defense at all. Any amount of defense, he's much worse. He's a first grader. But if there's no defense at all, he usually can make shots. I tell him that. Do you know what happens after that?
I mean, I sort of do because I've seen it on social media.
We go on a 16-0 run. Completely turn the game around. Look, maybe they were exhausted because there were only 5 of them. I don't know. But like, it was such an incredible turnaround. People were so excited. After that happened, I'm just like, I freaking dialed it up here. Dialed up everything perfectly. We end up hanging on to win the game. I was so hyped. It was funny. Before the third quarter, the other coach only has 5 kids. Like, my kids are just like standing at center court or whatever, just waiting for the other team. And the other coach is talking to his kids for like literally like 3 minutes or something, which is a long period of time when first graders are standing on the court. And I'm just like, how much coaching are you doing right now for these first graders?
It's also a long period of time when the game is 60 minutes long.
The notes that I gave, no, I think they're 8-minute quarters. I think they're 32 minutes long.
I'm saying like the whole game is over within a 60-minute span.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like you send that to the Super Bowl. It's like Kyle Shanahan talking on the field to his team for like an hour.
No, it really was. And I'm just standing and waiting. I'm looking at the reps being like, are we going to start? Like, does anybody notice that this is first grade basketball right now? The idea that there is a coach out there who is more intense than me about in-game coaching was a shocking experience. So that also made me feel a little bit better about holding on to win the game. After the game, Mateo got his Wilt Chamberlain. He scored 12 total points, which for first grade basketball is like easily 80. So he got his hand drawn 12.
Who wrote the 12?
That was me.
Okay.
I like that it could have either been him or me, and you wouldn't have known.
I didn't think it was him. I thought it could have been Luca.
So after the game, I got the title of not first, not second, third best coach in the world. Thank you. Would you like to guess who number 1 and 2 are?
So this is from Mateo?
Yes, of course.
So obviously the answers are Nick Sirianni
Yes.
and I didn't realize that Philly had the Knicks. So Nick Nurse?
Nope, not Nick Nurse. Kirby
Andy-
Smart. Kirby Smart is number 2.
Of course. All right.
When you think of the 3 great coaches in the world, Nick Sirianni, Kirby Smart, and me.
A really Italian heavy list.
I guess so. Yeah. I don't think Kirby Smart.
Oh, something tells me he's not.
I get the feeling
Even-
Kirby
even our
Smart has said some
grandparents, I don't think
questionable things about the country of Italy.
I would not impugn Kirby Smart in that way. But
I just feel like he's about the furthest thing from Italian. So that was pretty nice. And then at practice earlier today, there was one kid who kept like stealing the ball and stuff. And I'm like, these are not my rules. I was talking to him and he was like, you're the worst coach ever. And I was like, I'm just trying to be clear. I don't make these rules. I am just trying to enforce them so that when you play in the game, you don't get stopped or kicked out of the game. That's it. So he pushed me and called me the worst coach ever. And I was like, "Dog,
wow.
I've been through parenting Mateo. I can handle anything."
He was Travis Kelce to your Andy Reid.
Yes.
Hopefully it ends as well.
I thought that was hilarious. He like missed a shot in practice and just like collapsed to the ground out of anguish. And I started laughing because it's funny. And he did not like that at all.
Weird.
But I was like, I've parented Mateo for 7 years or however old he is. I can handle anything, dog. I've risen up the ranks to third best coach for him. He gave me many Philadelphia greetings. We're good.
All right, well, let's get into Seattle sports. Spring training is here. Julio is long tossing with Ichiro in a meeting of Seattle legends that you just love to see. In spring training with the Mariners, outfielder Kanan Smith and Jigba, brother of Seahawks receiver Jackson, who they claimed off waivers from the Pirates last week. Smith and Jigba played 18 games for Pittsburgh over the last 2 seasons. They just 135 and 37 at bats, but he hit 280 with 15 homers and 21 stolen bases in 105 games at AAA Indianapolis last season. Posted a 366 on base percentage, 473 slugging. He'll turn 25 in April and has 1 option remaining.
Seems like a worthwhile pickup. Also, he's training down at Driveline with Ty France.
There you go.
Have you seen that at all? Ty France is putting in work.
I heard it alluded to enough on Discord that I think I put that together. The full Fangraphs projections are out with the start of spring training. They have the Mariners projected for an average of 85 wins, a 59% chance to make the playoffs.
Are you aware that Gregory Santos is hurt already?
It doesn't seem like it's a big deal, does it?
It's just still, it's really, can we just not?
I mean, sure. Mariners ahead of the defending champion Rangers in those projections, projected for just 81.5 wins on average, a 36% chance to make the playoffs. AL West averages 0.8 wildcard spots with the depth of the AL East, but from that AL East, only the Yankees and the Rays make the playoffs in a higher percentage of simulations than the Mariners do.
Wow.
So Astros in the West, and I think the Twins still do in the Central. Or maybe the Guardians haven't.
I think this might be shaping up as possibly, I don't want to get ahead of myself, maybe this will be one of the most devastating seasons to be a Mariners fan.
Oh no.
Because I'll tell you, those Fangraph odds, when they look good, things do not go well.
When Fangraphs goes high, we go low.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we will continue to monitor that throughout spring training as we near the 2024 MLB season. The Kraken lost their first 2 games of their road trip coming out of the All-Star break before getting a 2-1 shootout win Tuesday against the Islanders. They then wrapped up their East Coast swing Thursday in Boston with a 4-1 win, getting a goal and 2 assists from Matty Beniers. Back home, I think he's from Boston, right? They start a 6-game homestand with a President's Day matinee against the Red Wings that will air on ESPN on Monday. The Seattle Sounders are now Renton's own. They inaugurated their...
Hockey's the only sport that's like, we have to claim President's Day.
Yes.
NFL is like, we got Thanksgiving. The NBA is like Christmas. NFL is taking that also. College football is like New Year's Day. And hockey's like, you know what? President's Day is all ours.
NBA used to have MLK Day, but NFL took that one as well.
NFL took everything. They're like, you can't even have this, NFL. They're going to add one more playoff week. And all of a sudden, they're going to be like, yeah, President's Day, headlining the President's Day slate of NFL games.
A 2-day Super Bowl?
Yeah, 2 days.
Day 2 is the second overtime they play on President's Day. But the NBA does not play at all on President's Day because it's traditionally the day after the All-Star game. The Sounders inaugurated their new Renton practice facility at the former site of Long Acres on Tuesday. Before coming home, they lost their final friendly in Marbella 5-1 over 180 minutes, so 2 90-minute matches with different rotating between to Danish side OB. They will wrap up the preseason by hosting a matchup against the Sacramento Republic of the USL Championship on Saturday. And then good news on Wednesday is center back Jackson Reagan returned to training for the first time since discovering a knee injury at the U.S. men's national team camp a month ago. Seattle Reign opened their preseason last Friday by traveling to Costa Rica and beating the Costa Rican women's national team, the Ticas, 4-0.
Be a professional. I should stop looking like a professional soccer player and just be a professional soccer player. Because I'm in Seattle, Washington, where it snowed.
That's true.
I'm not in Costa Rica at all.
Not even a little bit.
Did you actually had snow at your house? Because we didn't have any.
Oh, yeah. Like a significant amount of snow. It lingered pretty much all day, despite the fact that it rained so much.
More than Trace? You had like accumulation of snow at your house?
I mean, it wasn't an inch, but it was more than Trace, for
How
sure.
did it snow on the coast, but not here?
It's very odd, very unusual. Reign now back home to practice at Starfire, where they have replaced the Sounders as anchor tenants. Our UW softball, we mentioned this, a terrific start to the season for the Huskies in the Puerto Vallarta College Challenge. They run ruled. That's another place you want to be.
I could do that too. I think I'm literally going to LA in like 2 weeks, then Austin like 2 weeks after that. But
they run ruled number 17 Nebraska 8-0 in 5 innings in their season opener on Thursday, with Ruby Malin getting the shutout.
Big Ten foe Nebraska.
Future Big Ten foe. Glab supplying much of the offense with a home run and 4 RBI in her college debut on Friday. UW went toe-to-toe with number 1 Oklahoma, rallying from an early 2-0 deficit to take a 3-2 lead in the second. They maintained that through the 6th when the Sooners tied the game against Malin on in relief of Lindsay Lopez. And then Malin was still in there when in extra innings, the Sooners got the winning run in the top of the 8th.
When they were down, did Oklahoma demand to take the game back to their home?
The Huskies won.
They're like, it's my ball. I'm leaving. That's what Oklahoma does when they play. If they don't play a home game.
It was so unusual for them to play outside the state of Oklahoma. The Huskies won their 2 other games, moved up 4 spots to number 6 in the rankings, now tops among Pac-12 teams after UCLA went 2-3 last weekend.
Wow, pathetic.
This weekend, the Huskies are headed to the Shriners Children's Clearwater Invitational, which it's now occurring to me. I probably already started on Thursday, and we have some results here that I should have looked up and put into the
I love to find out about results live.
Well, it's going to be new to all of us. No, I guess they did not play. They play at 6:30 a.m. on Friday morning. So presumably by the time you listen to this.
In what time zone?
They're on the East Coast. They will have played. They play at 6:30 and 9:30 Pacific time on Friday, facing number 18 Kentucky and future Big Ten foe Minnesota. They get another future Big Ten foe in Wisconsin Saturday at 7 a.m., followed by number 12 LSU at 2 p.m., and then wrap up 6:30 a.m. on Sunday against North Carolina. That one's on the ACC network. Everything else on
future
ESPN
Big Ten
Plus.
foe North Carolina also.
It's going to be longer for that period of time, I would say. UW women's basketball threatened upsetting Stanford for a second straight year on Friday, rallying from a late 7-point deficit to force overtime on a tying Lauren Schwartz three with 15 seconds left. They pulled within two with 6 seconds left in the extra session, but the Cardinal offensive rebounded a Cameron Brink miss and got a second chance score to seal a 63-59 win. But those good vibes were lost on Sunday when the Huskies fell victim to a season sweep by Cal, going down 17-9 after one quarter, falling short in a comeback attempt. That loss dropped the Huskies to 10th in the Pac-12 at 3-9 and off the bracketology bubble entirely, with Cal now the last of the four teams, the next four out.
A very deep Pac-12 though.
Very deep, but you probably can't make the you definitely can't make the NCAA tournament at 3-9 in conference play, which is where the Huskies are now. So they badly need a sweep this weekend in Arizona. The Sun Devils got one of their two conference wins at Hecked earlier this season, while the Wildcats and our old friend Adia Barnes are one game ahead of the Huskies in the standings at 4-8.
So a possibility, man, the both being on the road. If these two games are at home, you would say that they had a pretty good chance of winning both. But
and yet they lost again to Arizona State at home, but they did beat Arizona as part of that weekend. Well, suddenly the UW basketball team that's looking up is the men. On last Thursday, they rallied from a deficit as large as 17 to get within 2 in the final minute of their loss at Oregon. Severe Wheeler had a turnover with the Huskies in possession, down 2. Wilhelm Breidenbach missed a 3 that would have tied the game. But on Saturday, the Huskies completed their season sweep of Oregon State in a 67-55 win, leading the entire game by as many as 20 points. And then earlier tonight, Thursday at home, beat Stanford 85-65 for their first back-to-back wins since January 11th.
Wow.
Corton Johnson came off the bench in that one to score a career-high 30 points, making 6 3-pointers. On Saturday, it's UW and Cal who come in tied in the Pac-12 standings at 6-8. Somewhat surprising for the Bears, because they went 4-7 in non-conference. Huskies going for the sweep after winning 77-75 in Berkeley. NBA prospect Jalen Tyson had 17 points in that one, but the Huskies limited him to 6 of 18 shooting. A third consecutive win would tie UW's longest Pac-12 winning streak since
under Mike Hopkins.
No, since starting the 2018-19 season 10-0 in conference play.
No, they didn't.
That's a true fact.
With Mike Hopkins as the coach?
You can look it up.
Who was on that team?
Matisse Thybulle, Jalen Noel.
That is so wild. It's funny because I feel like I've retconned the entire era. Like, to me, Thybulle played only under Romar.
Well, if you're gonna do the whole Kalen DeBoer only one with I guess Jimmy Lake's recruits and Chris Peterson's recruits.
Look, it's complicated.
It's very complicated.
But the Romar, Matisse Thybulle, Jalen, all these players, it's gets to sort of like, why didn't Obama see 9/11 coming? Like, that's what kind of territory you get into with it. But it is like, to me, I will remember Matisse Thybulle as he only played with Lorenzo Romar. Only bad things have happened under Mike Hopkins.
Again, none of this is factually accurate, but
I didn't say it was factually accurate.
It's just vibes accurate.
Yeah, but also everybody out there agrees. I should ask Jake One. In a scenario where Jake One is everybody,
I am confident of that.
So had they come back and beaten Oregon, I will say I watched most of the end of that game, and I was impressed with how they fought back. And it was one of those games that if it weren't Oregon, I would have been a little bit glib about it. But it was still like the loss to losing. I don't care about Oregon in basketball the same way I do in football. But like, had they had come back and Oregon cooed that game so incredibly, it would have been such an awesome win. And to have come up just short on that game, it really felt to me like that was it. We've had so many moments throughout the season. Like, we're so far past moral victories with this team and this roster. Like, if Mike Hopkins was a first-year head coach and if the roster was extraordinarily young, it'd be different. But it was just like, yeah, you almost got there, but you didn't. And maybe that's kind of what it feels like the Huskies are doing this season overall. But would have been nice to have had 3 in a row.
Yeah.
So if they win this one on Saturday against Cal, what are the remaining games? How many are left after that?
I mean, the schedule is frankly quite favorable for the Huskies. Stanford was granted it's at home, but one of their more challenging games remaining. They after the Cal game, they head to the Arizona schools next weekend. Then they're back home for the LA schools who are reeling, and then they finish with the return to the Apple Cup in Pullman. So they'll probably be favored in 4 of their 6 remaining games.
And if they run the table, if they win all 6 games,
I mean,
are they on the bubble at that point?
I don't know, but things would feel very different because suddenly the talk would be about like peaking at the right time, etc. That surely move into the top 50 in Ken Palm. So things would feel very different if they pulled that off. Although they would not have a lot of quality Pac-12 wins. There's not that many quality Pac-12 wins to be had, period. But they wouldn't have many of them.
Truly look forward to playing in the Big Ten, where it's just like there will never be a time. There's just going to be enough teams in the Big Ten where it's like there will not be a year where it's like, yeah, there just isn't a good team. There just is not a single good team in the entire Big Ten, or the West Coast Conference is better. Like, I do look forward to playing in a conference like that. What time is the Cal game on Saturday?
That one is at 5 p.m.
I wonder if I should go to that. I'm assuming the tickets are like $1.
One would think.
All right, I'm going to think about that. I'm going to give it an official. I'm going to think about it. Going
we could have a live update from a UW men's basketball game for the first time all season.
What do you mean?
First, if you go.
Neither of us have been a live update.
Well, yeah. I'm not saying we're going to be breaking in here. It's not going to be like when you're listening to.
Like, this wasn't Randy's last taco time location.
It's not going to be like when
we
you're listening.
Toasted to Randy on New Day Northwest also. What the hell?
Oh, that was on the notes. And somehow I think it was on the notes and then I skipped over it entirely.
You were just like, actually, myself starting a cookie search is more important.
No, I guess I forgot to put it on the notes. That's why it wasn't
like,
on
that's
there.
enough glory for Randy. A little bit more glory to myself and my solo cookie search.
Well, look, if you made it to this portion of the podcast, you probably already know about Randy's segment. But on the unlikely event that you
search for ESPN's senior writer Kevin Belton's favorite cookie in Seattle.
In the unlikely event you didn't, awesome for him.
Everybody else is Randy's alone on New Day Northwest. You're doing a solo cookie search.
Talking about visiting every Taco Time Northwest location, spreading the gospel of talking Taco Time.
I got a text
and shouting out the
starting a podcast on around.
What's it gonna be?
We'll see. You might review comedy specials. Chris's review of Netflix comedy specials and HBO comedy specials.
It's got to be Welcome to Totem Country, and you only interview Thai alums on the podcast.
Okay, fair enough.
It's niche.
Do you know the sign, like the giant sign that had like you would put like messages on it or whatever? Chris is in possession of that sign.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
How?
Isn't that incredible? So they tore it down, right? All of Thai is being torn down and renovated. And Ryan Norris, fellow Thai alum, is friends with the construction company that's doing the rebuild. He was like, "Can I have that sign?" And they were like, "Sure, here you go." Gave it to him. Ryan's going to keep one side. The other side's going to be at Big John Nizzle's house. Incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, we are fixtures of this Thai high school community.
And that's why you need to start your podcast.
Welcome to Totem Country. By the end, it'll just be like us interviewing people we happen to have gone to high school with.
Unfortunately, you're going to run through the list of...
It's Mikey again.
After, I don't know if you guys can have the pull to get Adam Smith on, but after you get Stacey Ross, it's going to be all downhill from there.
Like we got Steve Poole, RIP. We've got Adam Smith, no, probably not him.
No.
That's such a good joke. Michael Sawyer. You under your 0-hour classes that you took at Thai.
Okay. I didn't consider myself as a possibility.
We will allow it because we are running low on guests already.
Can you have on Les Carpenter because of the time that he
came to talk at Thai?
Yeah.
Who was that with the? Oh, because he was married to my
journalism teacher. Yeah,
I forgot about that. That was your first foray into big journalism.
It really was.
Anyway.
All right. Well, UW football.
Wait, I had one more Thai thought. I can't remember.
We mentioned this the last two of the transfers for this period of time. A pair of brothers following Jed Fish from Arizona. Defensive lineman Isaiah Ward started 11 games as a redshirt freshman last season, recording 4 sacks, forcing a pair of fumbles. He's got 3 years of remaining eligibility. So, a big addition to the defensive line for the Huskies. His older brother linebacker Anthony Ward saw his first career action on special teams last season, blocking a punt and returning it for a touchdown in Arizona's blowout win over Utah. He's got 2 years of remaining eligibility, but notably, besides for being brothers, the family roots run strong to Seattle already, as their uncle is Bobby Wagner, with whom they share an alma mater, that being Colony High in Ontario, California.
Wow, there we go.
So very exciting to have the Wards on board.
Are you familiar with a company called Chef Steps?
No.
I mean, they have 274,000 followers on Instagram, including just a random group of people, followed by both Treat Cookies and Lil Witties and Big Waz. Founded by a Tye alum.
Okay.
Who
So you
you thought that was just like a random thing I was bringing up?
I really didn't know what direction we were going with that one.
Grant Curley, who we went to high school with.
Okay. Nice.
He's not just a Tye alum. He's a Tye alum with us. So that's like extra points.
Okay. Well, I look forward to the pod.
Yeah, no, this is actually a great podcast for like, I love that we're getting even more micro. we're like, this podcast is aimed at people, not nationally like Taco Time, just the Northwest. This is only for people.
I don't think Northwest is Taco Time is what you're saying. And now you're zooming in smaller?
Yeah, we're zooming in even smaller to just SeaTac.
Well, not even all SeaTac. The Seattle Christian listener not getting any value out of your podcast.
I was walking through the market the other day, and there's like a Chef Steps, like, I don't know, maybe they have like a classroom in the market or something. And then I looked over and there he was. I was like, oh, there's Grant.
And you clearly didn't say hello.
He was like inside doing something.
Oh, I see.
I wasn't going to walk in there and be like, hey, haven't talked to you for 20 plus years. Did you also not go to the reunion? Hey.
I guess it is 20 plus years, isn't it? Wow.
I've been thinking about starting a podcast, actually.
Well, maybe Stacy can help you get the word out if you have her on. That's the end of the notes.
That's not the end of the notes. Well, it might be the end of the notes, but Husky football. So I listened to on the College Game Day pod with Reese Davis and Pete Thamel. Jed Fish was on there.
Heard rave reviews about his appearance.
From me?
No, from
multiple people.
Third Pelton brother Nate Taggart, among others.
I love Jed Fish. This man, I am ready to have him lead us into battle against Oregon. Like, Jed Fish, such a good speaker, but also just like the experience that he has and the places he's been and what he did at Arizona. To me, this is not even like the rationalizing portion. I think long term, if you were to give me, objectively speaking, apples to apples, Kalen DeBoer, Jed Fish, there's a little part of me, and I'm saying this, it sounds like I am like saying this because of Kalen DeBoer leaving, but I remember watching Arizona win that bowl game and just being like, holy shit. Like, what Arizona built this last year was such a young roster. And I think that's kind of the thing that gets lost in the mix. Like, he turned that team around, but that was a very young team that Jed Fish turned around at Arizona, and they were in a bad place before he got there. It was an incredible feat. And so he talked about kind of what we figured from the outside, which was when they're recruiting, having all of these people with NFL experience is going to be so important to them. And the other thing that came up, literally, they were like, why Washington? You know, what about this job intrigued you? And we talked about this last summer. And do you want to know what the first point he brought up was?
Like, I mean, my assumption would be like the city of Seattle, but the connection with the Seahawks, I guess, is from where you were going.
It is being part of the Power 2 in the Big Ten.
Oh, okay.
Literally trace it all the way back to that moment. And maybe thank you to Kalen DeBoer all things considered, because the Huskies might not be in there if it's not for him. But right now he's talking about he's at a program with a lot of good young talent, not nowhere near the kind of money or whatever infrastructure at Arizona, and being in the Big Ten. And that is going to be a point. It is going to be a huge, huge point for colleges that are in there, like exposure wise, when they are pitching to recruits, they are going to have so much luck. And the way that college football is now, everything is bubbling toward the top with the transfer portal. It is going to make his life a lot easier. So that was the number one piece that he brought up. They asked about his offense. He was like, I call plays everywhere I go. That's what I do. And I thought that was kind of exciting, just the confidence that Jedd Fisch has in his system. And he was like, I run Sean McVay's offense. And most recruits know who Sean McVay is and are familiar with the success that he had. You look at the Rams this past year, Puka Nacua coming from out of nowhere to being superstar receiver instantly, right? Like if you were to talk about anybody who's the steal of the draft, it's easily Puka Nacua. Sean McVay is a huge part of that. Also, Puka Nacua having the UW roots, I think is a big deal. But he was like, Sean McVay could come to Husky practice and call 75% of the plays. So it was interesting just how close he was talking about his offense being like Sean McVay's offense. And we also talked about this when we talked on the Seahawks portion, which was Ryan Grubb. There's maybe debate about how much of an NFL offense it is that Ryan Grubb is running. There's no debate about whether Jedd Fisch is running an NFL style offense. Jedd Fisch literally is coming from the NFL, learned under all of these coaches and running that offense. So I don't know. I'm so freaking hyped. And it might not, he even was like, they were like, what do you think about next year? And he was like, I got to learn these players. You know, it was one of those things where I feel like he seems, because people are so mad at him, people in Arizona are so mad at him, which is the one other point that I have to make. I don't even know if we need to acknowledge it, but like he seems a little bit like car salesman, like from the outside. And then you hear Jedd Fisch talk and you're like, yeah, like that's the answer that I want to hear, which is he's like, I don't know if we're going to be good this next year. I don't even know who these players are for the most part. He's not going to come in and be like, yeah, we're going to go in there and win or whatever. And I think I looked at the some sort of projections for the next season, and UW was still like 6 in the Big Ten. And to me, if after all of everything that happened, if UW is 6 in the Big Ten next year, that's a great outcome. Excellent. It'd be the same with Kalen DeBoer. They would probably be in the exact same place considering all of the players. There's the elite teams at the top that have retooled and brought back basically everybody: Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Penn State, Michigan, teams like that. And then UW is right there, right after them. So considering that this is a rebuilding year for the most part for UW, if they can kind of hover in that place, I mean, if they can even be close to where Penn State is and hover around there, and then occasionally with the playoff, make the playoff every 3 years or something like that, I think that is a great place to be for UW. So I was freaking hyped about it.
They currently do have the 6th best title odds at ESPN Bet among Big Ten teams.
Maybe that was what I saw. It was something like that. I think it actually might have been the title odds.
That seems reasonable.
The other piece was this people talking about the UCLA job, and it was just like, if the only person on the face of the earth who heard that Jedd Fisch interviewed for the UCLA job just happened to be a reporter for the University of Arizona, covering the University of Arizona, I would be very surprised if that was the information. And people treated it like it was real, and it was not corroborated by any national source, not a single national source. And you look at what happened with UCLA after that, with them hiring Deshaun Foster very quickly. It was not the kind of coaching search that the University of Washington had. And that to me was a program that is going to the Big Ten looking for a life draft, not going to the Big Ten in the same way that UW is going to the Big Ten. And it's funny to me that they would go cheap on the search because they're getting a full share right away. UW isn't getting that full share right away. So the place that UCLA football is at right now is definitely a sad place compared to where UW is and the search that they had. But the idea that Jedd Fisch would have accepted this job, moved all of these coaches and players across the country to Seattle, Washington, and then would be like, whoa, hold on, UCLA, with no indication that that job was going to open while Chip Kelly was interviewing for job after job after job. Jedd Fisch knew that job was going to open up, and he took the UW job. So it's fucking laughable that anybody would think that he was interviewing for the UCLA job or remotely interested in the UCLA job. I don't know if apples to apples, if it's a better job anyway, but in this very moment, it is definitely not a better job. So it was a fucking absurd thing for anybody to even fucking engage with.
But then yet you did engage with it for the last 2 minutes here. Here's what I have to say about the whole Jedd Fisch experience thus far. I am hopeful that the Huskies do well enough under Jedd Fisch that everyone's angry when he leaves for a bigger job. That's my number one wish.
Great. I mean,
So,
no, people weren't mad when Jim Harbaugh left. That's what we want. We want him to do well enough that he can leave, and we'd be like, there's a better tier. You're not even mad when they leave. That's the best tier.
I mean, also leaving for the NFL is different than leaving for another college job, I would say.
And Jedd Fisch couldn't coach in the NFL? Like,
I don't think it's as likely.
If anybody is successful, if Jedd Fisch is as successful at college as Kalen DeBoer was, he's more likely to get an NFL job because he's coached in the NFL. He's a much
agree
more
with that.
likely
He's
NFL
not as
coach
likely
than
to get
anybody else.
He's not as likely an NFL coach as Jim Harbaugh, who had coached in a fucking Super Bowl and played for many years in the NFL.
Jim Harbaugh is an extreme outlier. But the other thing he talked about in that podcast was persistence, and that to me, when you are getting recruits, when your job is going out and getting something, he's talking about leaving a note on Steve Spurrier's car for 370 straight days or whatever. Like, Jedd Fisch is a persistent motherfucker, and it seems to me like trying to go out and get players, I think he will outwork almost everybody else, and that's how you get players like Noah Fafita, like Tedero McMillan to the University of Arizona, and the next generation of those players to the University of Washington when given the assets of a Carroll and a Belichick on your staff and being in the Big Ten. Like, I don't know. I think UW long-term is in a very, very nice place right now.
I agree. Well, nothing says persistent like continuing to record this podcast. Over 370 episodes and counting. On that note, sir.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Nope.
We still haven't gotten it down. 400 plus episodes later.
You teed it up and then you didn't